early years of the Fourth Republic, well known to students of constitutional law, which helped shape the evolution of the Constitution of the Fourth Republic. As Deputy Attorney General, as he then was, he conducted those cases with the fairness which should be a cardinal feature of the conduct of any self-respecting lawyer. Mr. Amidu has indicated his willingness to accept the appointment. I congratulate him on his deserved nomination and wish him Godspeed in the valiant efforts he will undoubtedly be making to enhance the quality of governance of our country.
Mr. Amidu, who introduced the word Gangantuan.
There were also some reactions after the president made the announcement. Ahead of the vetting, we've been talking to the Ghana Integrity Initiative. Linda Oferekwafo is executive director. Well, I understand we are not ready with that. So let's talk about the man, Martin Amidu. As well, before we do, let's hear from Imani on his appointment.
To have witnessed the kind of decision making he's capable of. We've been fortunate to have seen, without he contemplating this present job, how he will behave if one of his own goes against his principles. And the history is there for you to look at, to the extent that the Supreme Court has commended him. So I don't think anybody has done as much as he has done in fighting corruption, even when he had to fight against his own people. So that whole notion of, would he not be biased, in favor of his people, I think has been totally disproven. He's shown us that he's a man of principle, and if it comes to that, he's going to stand up for what is right. I've heard some NDC people say that, well, what it means is that he's moved to the other side. Clearly, he has not. Martin Amidu has never made any, claim to have moved from NDC. He still claims to be an NDC person. And I don't think that if he can rise up against his own, he would have any qualms rising up against people from the other side if they make a mistake. So he has proven to us that he's capable of that and actually has done it. Whether he will do it in the future, we don't know. But again, we make our decision based on the best information available to us. And we are all happy about it. Of course, we can't tell what the future holds, but I don't think there is anybody better suited for this position than Martin Amidu. To that extent, therefore, I'm very happy with the appointment.
So that was Imani's Kofi Bento, and that also was his reaction to the appointment of, well, the nomination of Martin Amidu for the OSP. Let's continue with our conversation here, but I'd also like to remind you that we will lace this conversation with happenings in Parliament as far as the vetting is concerned. Ibrahim Al-Hassan is on the ground for us. We'll get in touch with him. Minutes ago, he had told us that the committee was in a pre-vetting meeting and should begin any moment from then. We haven't heard anything yet, and so we'll go back and find out what's happening. If you just joined us, this is GH1 Television. My name is Kemini Amano. In the studio with me are two gentlemen. Andrew Ejapa Mesa is MP for Sekondi, and Abraham Amalba is a legal practitioner who is on fire this morning. But when you hear how people talk about the man Martin Amidu, it would seem this is a man who has no blots at all, no dents, no taint anywhere. This is an almost perfect man. We heard from his bosom friend from the vetting grounds who spoke, who praised him, sang praises as far as the person of Martin Amidu is concerned. Do you find that problematic, Mesa?
No, I don't. Particularly because I am firmly behind His Excellency the President in his quest to nip corruption in the bud. Of course, I had the privilege of meeting the President post the appointment. And he was clear in his mind that, look, I have made a commitment to the people of Ghana. I am committed to abide by that commitment that I've made. And that to the extent that this gentleman has distinguished himself clearly in, as it were, fighting to protect the public purse. he thought that it was the best person to appoint at this time. And so, yes, people who know him necessarily would sing his praise, particularly because we all know the impact that corruption is having on this country. I go to my constituency, and if you look at the waste, the corruption in that is permeating our political and socio-economic fabric. It is important that if we get somebody of his stock who is able to help in that direction to reduce corruption by even 10%, that in itself will be significant. So yes, I mean, they can claim that he is from their stock. I do not have any problem at all. So long as he is a Ghanaian and he can deliver. His commitment against the fight, the corruption fight, is well known. His public spiritedness, like the president said, is well known. We all are just not coming from Mars. We live here, and we know what he did. You know, when he was removed as Attorney General, and the reasons for his removal has been made clear.
We'll get into that. You know, journey.
So I'm very happy that His Excellency has made an excellent choice. And yes, of course, if indeed, let me, he made a point that I think it's important. If indeed the Supreme Court finds that the pension age of 70 is not applicable to Mr. Martin Amidu, and that the age that properly applies to him by virtue of this act is 60 years, why you think the president will say that, damn the Supreme Court, I'm doing what I have to do? Clearly not.
Too good to be true, or what we see is what we get.
I want a lawyer to speak.
Nobody says that I've said.
Nobody says that Amidu is not qualified. Nobody says that Amidu.
We are back to the legal.
That is all that I've said consistently throughout the beginning of this
program. This is refreshing to hear from a lawyer that we cannot be breaching our laws.
But that is why I said that it's important that the Supreme Court makes a determination one way or the other.
When you look at the suit itself, it is not attacking the credibility of the person.
Yes,
it's not saying that Amidu is not qualified.
I don't think we have said
Nobody
that
has said so yet.
Oh, I don't know whether I'm a different person. I'm saying that all these niceties about Martin Amidu, nobody is condemning them. Absolutely. Even the one who went to court has not said that Martin Amidu is not qualified. That's not what he's saying.
Absolutely.
We are only saying that the law says 60, 65. The man is 66. Look, today, if we go and amend,
according to you.
will you keep quiet? If we go to the today, if we go and amend the constitution and it says 66, I will come here and say, who is Martin Amidu? But the law, we've written it.
Okay, so
the law says 65.
Since we are back to the legal issue.
So if the man is not within the age limit,
we should deal with it.
No matter how he is.
Amend the constitution.
Supposing he's even Jesus Christ's younger brother. The law says no. It is no. That is all I'm saying.
But you see, Kemeni, the law, as you understand it.
Okay.
Because there are provisions in the absolutely.
Have I said that?
So don't make it seem as if somebody has breached the law in appointing him. That is not the case.
Okay.
Let the court make a pronouncement.
You see, those who went to court feel strongly
that
they
are feeling
a breach,
and we need
and that is
absolutely
very well.
But the place you make that pronouncement is the Supreme Court. They will pronounce
who has disputed that?
But these arguments that the man is good, the man can fight. Well, look, God forbid.
Oh, but we'll have to look at whether or not the man can fight.
Nobody says that he can. God forbid. He can go today. God forbid. He can go today and collapse them. We won't fight corruption again.
Oh, we'll fight because it's a whole office.
So what's the point?
But since we've gone back to the legal issue, I want to ask both of you. We agree that it should be subject to interpretation at the courts. My question is, the Act gives a fixed office of 7 years. Is that it?
Yes.
Martin will be 67 this year. He has 3 more years to go. If for any reason we are told that the elevation of his terms and conditions to that of the Justice of the Court of Appeal, which for those arguing in favor, puts his retirement at 70. That's 3 more years to go. How do we reconcile the two? I mean, for the purpose of those of us who want to understand, how do we reconcile the two? The fact that in 3 years he should be retiring and he has a fixed term office of 7 years.
There's no issue there at all.
Oh, I see.
And I'm wondering whether it's part of the argument that they are
No,
making
it's not.
before the court.
It's something that came to mind.
Because that would have been extremely surprising to me. Because as far as I'm concerned, if the framers of the law did not anticipate a particular age of appointment, so it could, for all intents and purposes, be a 30-year-old competent person who is appointed to that office. Clearly, he has 40 more years to go, but we can't give you beyond 7 years. So if he's 66, 67, and the office says, well, you can't do more than 7, but that your pension age is 70, then when he turns 70, he has to vacate office for a new person to appoint it. That's all.
You see, you asked a very good question. Those who framed this law were of the view that the 7 years given to the special prosecutor should be uninterrupted 7 years.
Okay.
And that they even wanted to cut across regimes. So the question of whether Martin can enter into the office and retire when he's 70, and that 3 years, he can go and do 3 years and come out, does not arise at all, because the framers of the Constitution said that this 7 years is uninterrupted 7 years, which means that...
We'll come back and deal with this in a bit, but let's go to Parliament now, where the vetting has begun.
In 59, after 3 months, I found myself in Boku, and we made a permanent home in Boku from 59 up to date. I went to elementary school in Boku and then entered the University of Ghana. Practiced law for some time, did national service, practiced law for some time, and between February 1982 and December 1982, the PNDC appointed me chairman of the Committee of Inquiry into the Cotton Development Board pertaining to allegations of corruption and maladministration. And I had the honor to serve with the present Lorana, Edward Cabo, and one Ajay, who is now a professor in the University of Cape Coast. After submitting our report, I was invited to an interview and appointed PNDC Deputy Secretary to the Upper East Region in February 1983. I served as PNDC Deputy Secretary until 2001, when there was a change in government. In between, I served in both sectors and regions. In 1988, it became necessary for the Social Security Bank to be investigated. And while I was at the Volta region as the PNDC Deputy Secretary, the PNDC thought that the only credible person to chair that investigation was myself. So I was given additional responsibility for that committee, which I dutifully completed, and there is a white paper on it that resulted in the reorganization of what is today SG Bank. After that, became Deputy Attorney General and served in that position from 1988 through to the constitutional regime. I served as Deputy Secretary for Ministry of Justice and Deputy Attorney General through the first 2 terms of the NDC government. And my exploits in the courts in defense of that regime before and after the Constitution came into force have been recited by His Excellency the President when he was introducing me. And I'm among the few who helped the development of the constitutional law of this country. Unfortunately, the Right Honorable Peter Lajete and Darocha, who were more senior to me, no more, but the President was a worthy opponent and he knew my abilities and capabilities. After the coming into force, into power of the NDC in 2009, I served under that regime as Presidential Advisor, later as Minister of Interior, and then later still as Attorney General. In 1999, I had the honor of being nominated by Chief Justice Isaac Kobina Aban to come to the Supreme Court. I declined it. Alhaji Dramani Yakubu is no more, but Justice William Abagambiri Atuguba, who is currently serving on the Supreme Court and is supposed to be the oldest justice on that court in terms of years at the bar, and your former Right Reverend Speaker, Justice Bamford Addo, were people who spoke to me and tried to persuade me, but I will not change my mind. This is to demonstrate that my acceptance of the position of special prosecutor is not because of the status, but it is because of the high ideals which are attached to making sure that the ordinary people of this country can have the benefit of the resources of this country by stopping the leakages and seepages that has gone on since the coming to force of the 1992 Constitution. You will recall, Honorable Chairman and members, that the reasons and excuses given for coup d'etats in this country are the prime ones are bribery and corruption. And people, generals, have laid down their lives even for taking loans in the bank. It is important, as the chairman of the House Committee of the Consultative Assembly, who took a no mean part in the draft of the 1992 Constitution, to defend it and ensure that it is not abrogated by preventing anybody or group of persons pursuant to Article 3 thereof who seek to encourage the abrogation of the Constitution by perpetuating the rape of the national purse. So when I left office in 2012, I decided to dedicate myself to the defense of the Constitution. When you remember the role Adelphi Buamponsam, Osajifo Kutunkununku, Bobobi, Rula Tekesin, Binin, and others who have lost their life played in the Consultative Assembly for the defense of this country, and you are a member of that assembly, you will not allow anybody to do anything that is contrary to maintaining the ideals and values of the Constitution which we fought to bring in force. It's important that this country is stabilized. It's important that nobody makes excuses to make a coup. The only way we can do that is to protect the national purse and give people who want to use that as an excuse as not to have the grounds. So when the president invited me and I raised some issues about the law, he told me, Martin, you know, as a constitutional lawyer, that whatever Parliament decides, he said, no, unless it is declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So I said, well, let me read it, and we'll run. When I read it, I agreed with the president that whatever wrong there is with the law, the fight against corruption was more important to protect the Constitution. And you just don't throw the dirty water along with the baby. So I agreed, having read the law, that
thank you, Honorable Nominee. We have heard enough about you. Now, colleagues will ask questions relating to specifics in your CV.
Chairman, let me thank you for the opportunity and to wish the nominee well, but to refer him to the President's letter of 11th January 2018. The President spells, and your name is Mr. Martin Alamisi Benz Kaiser Amidu. The President spells his Benz with an E. In your CV, the E is lost. Which one should this committee go with? And would you want to give us your name as it should be?
My name as it should be is the one on my CV. And you know, Honorable Member, that the name is a nonsense syllable. And when the syllables are misplaced, It has nothing to do with the real name. It is Benz without an E, and I believe it's typographical error.
In your introduction in the CV, you stated you were born in 1951. May you share with this committee the day and month together with the year of your birth?
Well, as I told you, my mother got pregnant in Hafasni and delivered me in Kadama. And then when later on we discovered the record on which my father had written my birthday, it's supposed to be a Thursday. That's why I'm called Alamisi. And that's the record which my father wrote in his illiterate handwriting. It was among his things when we saw it. I used to debate with Professor Amidu that he was not far older than me until we discovered the record, which shows that I was born on 6th September. And when we checked later, it's true that 6th September was a Thursday. You know that there was no births and deaths in Navrongo, let alone Kadama.
So the record is correct, 6th September 1951. The record is correct. That's all.
Yeah, in fact, it is the Gold Coast. It was a protectorate, not part of the colony.
So you were born 6th September 1951, per the CV submitted to this committee?
Yes, in the Northern Territories of the protectorate.
Which part of the protectorate?
The protectorate, you know, the protectorate joined Ghana on 6th, 1956 during the plebiscite, if you look at the history of this country.
And then before I yield to the Honorable Ablakwa, page 2 of your CV, you have 1966-1971 school certificate GCO level uncollected from the school. You have the same thing repeated for 1971-1973 uncollected from the school. What accounts for that, and what explanation do you have for the committee?
The explanation is simple. You will see in my CV that I wrote GCA level in 1972 in Tamale. It took more than 2 years for that certificate even to be posted to the Workers' College for me to collect it. So when we left, when I went to Navrongo School, I was the person with the highest grades entrance form in Navrongo School that year. But there were people who had done better, who had even 5-1s and 6-1s in Navasco, right? So I entered Navrongo School with that aggregate, which was the highest aggregate. Then I wrote the A-level, as you see, in 72. And then I got very credible grades, which had never been gotten in the North before, right? So I entered Legon, by which time the O-level from commercial school had not arrived from the exams council. And the Navasco records took a long time to arrive. But in those days, the universities worked with the authentic records from the West Africa Exams Council, upon which they admitted. So I never went back to commercial school to ask for it, because I really didn't think that I needed it. But I'm still there because it's my alma mater. And I was one of their best students, and I thought that they would need it for posterity. Navasco too is lying there. I'm told some BNI man was in my village on the 1st. And I thought he would go to Navasco. The headmaster would have taken my file and given it to him. There's no reason why I didn't go for it. It's just that I didn't think that I should go to Navasco asking for the certificate when I had gone to Legon, they had authenticated the results. I brought all the other certificates, but because they are still with Navasco and commercial school, if you ask the Minister for the Interior, he will tell you I was not just a passing by student. I was very good.
Thank you. We will not call evidence at this table.
No, I was their prefect.
I'm sorry. Yes, Honorable Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Martin Amidu, I have a few questions for you on your CV for clarity purposes. On page, under bullet 4, employment history, you've written Executive Director of the Not-for-Profit Citizens Vigilance for Justice.
Yes.
When did you establish this, and is it a non-profit organization?
It was registered on it was registered to commence business on the 27th of September 2017. It's registered at the Registrar General. I was using a non-registered organization as citizen vigilance, but then I decided that I will establish it as a non-for-profit. So I applied to the Registrar General's department, and then I was one of the directors. And I never knew at that time that I would succumb to accept to leave it so early. But it's registered at the Registrar General's department. If I had known you would have asked it, I would have even brought the certificates and everything. By 17th September 2017.
Okay. Again, under conferences or conference and capacity building programs attended, A, you've written head of delegation. When you go to C, head of delegation as well for these international conferences. I want to clarify, which delegation? Is it the Ghanaian delegation that you headed to these conferences, or in what capacity were you leading the delegation?
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't write it well, and I accept that in communication theory, the one who communicates is responsible for the meaning. But I assume that being the Attorney General at the time, I will lead the Ghana delegation. That's why I just put head of delegation, because that was it's only the Ghana delegation I could have led. But I should have clarified it, admittedly. And all the head of delegation I have been is as either a minister of Ghana or a deputy minister of the Ghana delegation. But I assumed it. I just subsumed that because I held those positions, it will follow. But it appears it doesn't.
Right. So thank you for the clarification. I want to ask, this is the last one. Under educational background. Under educational background.
Yes, madam.
Under G and H, I want to see clarification. No, it's G and I, rather. G and I. Yeah. One, you're telling us University of Ghana, into bracket, Ghana School of Law, and the year is 1976 to 78.
Yes.
I presume that's when you were called to the bar. But distinctively, you've stated in I as well, in 1978, enrollment on the lawyers of the Republic of Ghana. Maybe it's different from when I was called to the bar. So I want to ask you, was it done separately, and why did you decide to split the two?
Madam, thank you for the question. In our time, the University of Ghana ran the professional law course on behalf of the Ghana Law School. So if you are looking for my transcripts, you won't get them at the Ghana Law School. You get them at the University of Ghana. But in the final year, you go to the Ghana Law School for 3 months for lectures, and then you do the moot court there. That is why I put the University of Ghana in brackets, Ghana School of Law. And it was a 2-year position. Many people write BL and all that by their name. I know that at the General Legal Council meeting, of which I was a member, headed by Justice Aban, he said that lawyers should be permitted to use BL. But the Legal Profession Act requires what I have stated there. It doesn't recognize BL. Lawyers are not given any BL. They are given the certificate I've quoted is verbatim from the Legal Professions Act. So the certificate I've brought indicates that it's a certificate qualifying me. People used to think this certificate was the pre-law course. So if you had a BA and you were coming to read law, they call themselves QCL. That's not it. It is the final certificate you get upon the completion of the 2-year course, which the Act, qualifies as qualifying certificate. So that's why you see it separate. So I was given that certificate. When you get that certificate, then you go through the process for enrollment. And when you are enrolled, you sign the roll of lawyers and you are given a certificate of enrollment on the roll of lawyers. So this 78 qualifying certificate was issued in September 78. But we had to wait to the 11th November 78 to be enrolled and issued a certificate of enrollment on the roll of law. In fact, I'm quoting directly what is on the certificate. And since I was asked to bring certificates, I decided that I'll quote precisely. I'm a little bit conservative. I don't like cutting shortcuts.
Thank you. I would suggest that in your answers, try to be a little less conservative and cut them short for us.
Very well. Thank you very much.
Yes, Honorable Member for Northtown.
I'm grateful, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to the Honorable Martin Amidu. I will want to begin from the second page of the Honorable nominee's CV. Under the item G, University of Ghana, 1973 to 1978, LLB Honors. The records we have here in the House, the last you appeared before this committee on the 18th of February 2010. The records show that Mr. Martin Amidu was born on 6 September 1951. He obtained his Bachelor of Laws, LLB, in 1976 from the University of Ghana, Legon. That's quoting from the Hansard of Thursday, 18 February 2010. But here on your CV, we have 1978. Just want to find out from the Honorable nominee for clarification. What should be the proper record?
Mr. Chairman, I didn't go to a regular secondary school. I went to a commercial institute. And in the commercial institute, we have called what we call accidental slips and omissions. If you look at H, my entry into the Ghana School of Law is 76 to 78. So if you read the CV within context, it's easy to see the accidental slip in omission that are really, and the LLB is 3 years. So this is just an accidental slip of omission due to typographical slip, which in commercial practice is very normal. So if you, as I explained, it's an accidental slip and omission.
Accepted, Chairman. It's an error. The record should. Please proceed. Sorry, Honorable nominee. Sorry.
And I will wish that you correct it to reflect.
Thank you. The correction will be carried out.
The age shows.
I'm grateful, Mr. Chairman. We'll correct it accordingly. And employment history, Mr. Chairman, I ask this question because we have two entries here. Executive Director of the Not-for-Profit Citizen Vigilance for Justice, Civic Justice, since 27th September 2017, and Public Service Pensioner Constitutional Defense Activism, February 2012 to date. But taking note of Section 13.7 of the Office of the Special Prosecutor Act 2017, Act 959, it states the Special Prosecutor shall not, while holding office, hold any other public office or engage in any commercial venture, unquote. Mr. Chairman, just finding out from the honorable nominee if he intends to keep these positions as he has entered under employment history, bearing in mind Section 13(7) of the Office of Special Prosecutor Act.
Mr. Chairman, my position is that, and I have made arrangements to relinquish my position as an executive director, not because I think it will conflict with Act 959, because Act 959 says I should engage in commercial ventures. So a not-for-profit won't be a commercial venture. But I thought that for the avoidance of doubt, I should relinquish it and allow the legal entity to go on. You know, the entry about pensioner, the real situation is that because I joined the PNDC as a secretary in '82 and served for more than 20 years and paid the Social Security benefits, I was entitled to payments after that. That really didn't make me a public officer under Article 191. It's just part of the pension act, which says if you contribute. I still remain a lawyer who decides that he would rather do activism than practice. So that is the position. I have made my contributions more than 20 years. I reached 60, and then I decided to take the claim. But then that doesn't really make me a public servant. I was a political office holder, and I'm now a private citizen. And indeed, they even say that market women can apply for Social Security as long as they pay the requisite money. When they reach 60, they can go. So that's the explanation for the public service thing. And so the impression that I was like a chief director should be disabused. I was a political office holder, not a public servant under 191.
Grateful, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on page 3 of the CV, Amidu Consults, 2002 to June 2009. But after that, there is no other mention of Amidu Consults. Are you able to please tell this committee what the current status is of Amidu Consults?
Mr. Chairman, if you recall, I was vetted in 2010, and this very issue arose. I think the current Minister for Education raised it, and I said Amidu Consult was deregistered in 2006. It was deregistered in 2006, but I had done some consultancy work for ISODEC and others. So this Honorable House said that, okay, even though ISODEC had paid my tax, I had to pay some additional tax. So that was done, and that was the condition over which I was approved. And then I became a minister. Amidu Consult deregistered. I have left 2012. It's defunct. I don't practice law, which is a choice. I decided to be an activist, even though the knowledge of the law is still in my head.
I'm grateful, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the honorable nominee, under his biodata and personal profile, under the numbers of children, was very generous with this committee, provided us details of the ages of the children. But under marital status, we only have married. Are you able to share with this committee?
What more did you want to know?
That is disallowed. No. If there's another question receiving, please.
No, Chairman, there's a reason for the question.
No, Sammy. No. Still on the children, Chairman. Page 1. Adults, 35, 41, and 43 years respectively. Who are those? And respectively qualifies for who? We need to know. 31 in respect of who, 43 in respect of who.
Mr. Chairman,
just adults is not
names
sufficient.
Are in respect of from senior, junior to senior. And the question was children. Honestly, I was going to say no child. And I use adult children because I have no responsibility for these people as children. So as far as I'm concerned, they are not my children. If you go to the UK and tamper with anybody of this age, you go to jail. So it's because of the ambiguity of the question that I put those names there. But
an ambiguous question deserves ambiguous answer.
My family matters are private. You know?
Mr. Member, I think it's sufficient. I mean, what is interesting is the children and the adults. Now I get the import because you're asking whether he has children, but he has adults. Yes, Honorable Obiawa.
No, I'm not done, Mr. Chairman. The final one from me. The final.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The final one from me.
Obi, hold on. Yes, Sammy, your last one.
The final question on the CV from me, Honorable Chairman. It's on page 3. I noticed an overlap when the Honorable nominee was Deputy Attorney General and Minister of Justice. He has an entry here, MA Conflict Resolution, Antioch University, McGregor, Ohio, USA, 1999 to 2001. Just want to find out for clarity if this entry is accurate. Probably it was a sandwich program or a correspondence course because at this time you were Deputy Attorney General. Just for clarity, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, it was a cohort course which as Deputy Attorney General I undertook. I went to the US for 2 weeks at a time, 2 occasions. I was in cohort 12. The rest of the course was online. And because it was online, it took that period of time to complete. The certificate, I was asked to bring all certificates, is here.
Very well, Honorable Obiama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Martin Amidu, welcome. You have a very rich CV. Some parts are quite interesting. But the first one I want to ask is, you said you were Presidential Advisor on Legal Affairs, July 2009 and February 2010. In what respect were you a Presidential Advisor?
The then President, Professor John Evans Adam Mills, had nominated me as ambassador. And then, for personal reasons, I couldn't take that appointment. So he invited me and offered me Presidential Advisor on Legal Affairs. We had been friends for more than 30 years, and so I accepted it, and I gave him legal advice. My office was in the castle, and his secretaries knew how close we were and how frequently I was called upon to advise him. But it was for a short period, and then I think there was discomfort, so I was moved to Interior.
So, were you under the Presidential Office Act? Your appointment, did it come under the Presidential Office Act?
I think so.
You're not sure?
The letter is there, just that I didn't know that you would need it. But there was a letter signed by John Henry Newman. He appointed me as a presidential advisor to the president. It didn't state the legal affairs. But when I came, that was the assignment I was given.
Okay. The leadership positions held. This is just an aside. I've seen vice presidential candidate, secretary, junior common room, the general secretary. But I thought after the elections, you also had a position, shadow vice president.
That is disallowed. On CV, yes. No, minority, majority.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. I want to take the honorable nominee back to an issue that has just been discussed. And I think it's important because this is a house of records so that we get it clear. Mr. Chairman, I don't think it will be fair to let it pass if viewers are listening and the interpretation.
Honorable member, kindly ask the question.
Yes, that's what I'm getting to, Mr. Chairman. Please, if you'll be patient with me. Thank you. Okay, so I don't think it will be fair to let it stand, especially that some children may be watching. If it is interpreted to mean that when your children become adults, they cease being your children. Even if they are adults, I think they are still your children. And the nominee says that he doesn't think that they are his children. But I think that we have to set that record straight. Does the nominee agree with me, please?
Mr. Chairman, Shakespeare says there are as many opinions as there are men. In my learning and understanding, children are children. When they attain the age of majority, they legally are adults and no more children. So my understanding is that I have no control over these three adults. And if I attempt to control them, I could be in legal trouble. That's why I call them adults. But biologically and legally, when they were kids, they were my children. That's my opinion.
So do they cease being your offspring? Do they cease being your children? Because
they don't cease being my offsprings. They are my adult companions for whom I will do anything because of the blood connection between me and them. But they are not, strictly speaking, children.
Right, Mr.
And as I said, there are as many opinions as there are men.
Mr. Chairman, I'll proceed to another issue that has to do with his certificate. And I relate one provision from the Ohio, United States of America, 1999 to 2001. The Chairman, at the same time, it seems to me that he was undertaking this program. He was also Deputy Attorney General and Deputy Minister for Justice. That was between January 1997 to January 2001.
It has just been asked by...
Mr. Chairman, I know, I said so, but if you are patient with me, you will see that I have a different question related to it. Thank you.
Very well.
Okay, thank you. So can the nominee confirm to this committee if indeed at the time that he was pursuing this cause, he was a minister of state, and that is to say he was a student minister. He was a minister and at the same time, a minister of the republic, paid by the taxpayers' money and still schooling at the same time.
I wasn't a student minister. I discharged my duties as Deputy Attorney General fully. If you go to the law reports, it will tell you that I distinguished myself for the NDC government creditably within that period. And at my spare time, I use the computer to enriching myself. I'm not those who go to Jimpa, the army, this thing, while the whole office. I didn't do that. I stayed in Ghana, used the distance learning at my spare time, and fulfilled my ministerial duties to the letter. That's what happened.
Mr. Chairman, so is the nominee saying that at no point in time did he visit the school?
I visited the school, but it was upon permission from the government. I didn't elope. I didn't go on a wall. Never. I was the approval for me to go for 2 weeks and come back. And indeed, the government was interested in my program. That is what you have the Alternative Dispute Act from. That is how the judiciary came to deal with conflict resolution, right? And to improve upon it. That is why I spearheaded the National Peace Council Act into Parliament. I enriched my knowledge to be able to fulfill my duties at my own private time. And what else will it demand from a patriotic minister who wants to help his nation?
So, Mr. Chairman, the point is that he was a minister and a student.
Honorable member, do you have another question?
I want his confirmation. Is that?
Do you have another question?
Mr. Chairman, I just want his confirmation. So he was.
He has confirmed it. Yes, Honorable Atacha.
Yes. Leonard Senior, I am beside myself regarding this student minister thing you've introduced. But there is a fact of law that I want you to come to terms with. If you said that children, when they graduate into adulthood, cease to be children, then you are rewriting the whole of succession laws. Then the whole of inheritance will be cancelled. And therefore, by operation of law, insofar as somebody comes out of your loins, even if it's 90 years and you are 150 years, that person remains a child and can inherit you. So, Senior, I do not share your view at all. That by reason of an
Honorable Minister, are you asking a question or offering an alternative?
No, I'm stating that I'm making a statement of law. There is no opinion concerning a child. Yes. As he claims there is an opinion. There's no opinion. It's an operation of law. Are you the biological, father of somebody? That ends it. The age factor is of no consequence. And we shouldn't sit there and rewrite the rules of succession to mean that when you were a child...
Member, can you ask a question without due deference? Or
yes.
Your opinion is stated, it is noted.
No, I have not stated an opinion. I've stated the position of the law. In terms of the laws of succession.
I think it's sufficient. Let's proceed with questioning. Yes. After that, I'll come to you.
Yeah, my question is so important that it will determine whether I should recuse myself or participate. I have grown up to know Mr. Martin Amidu as a citizen of Boku, and I have grown up as a close family member. Today, I have a CV before me that says that his hometown is Kadima. We, the people of Boku, want to know, is he with us as Boku or he's with the Kadima people? Kadima people.
Mr. Chairman, the answer on my CV was dictated by the question. My parents come from Kadima, both mother and father. So, if you ask of hometown, I assume that that's the hometown. My permanent place of residence since 1959 has been Boku. You know, and this was a non-issue until I became running mate. And then people started pulling apart where he comes from. But it really didn't matter. I even thought I was an Nzima when I was growing up. Until my father was sent to Boku, and then 1969 he sent us to his village. Then we realized that after all, we're not from South, we're from North. And as Ghanaians, for me, I think that I was answering the question based on the place of birth, as I said, Kadima. And why did they send me there to be born? Because my father and my mother come from there, right? So when you ask hometown, the question is, if I put Boku, my parents don't come from there, even though they lived and died there, each of them. So that's why the question dictated the answer.
Thank you. Yes,
I'm closer to Boku than any other chief.
Yes.
So we Boku people have lost the fight.
Mr. Chairman, I've just said I'm closer to Boku than any other chief. And I've said that both my parents lived and died in Boku. Your father knows that.
Yes, we quite take that was global. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Martin Alamisi Benz Kaiser Amidu, congratulations. I want to take you through page 5 and 6 of your CV. One, as head of delegation to Commonwealth Law of Ministers and senior officials to Sydney, Australia. Then head of delegation, Commonwealth Law Ministers Conference, Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. Then in Kuala Lumpur. My question that I want to ask you respectfully, is the Commonwealth relevant today in terms of our contemporary Honorable Deputy Minister, we want to finish with the CVs. We will come to substantive questions.
Why is CV now?
No, you're deliberately driving or circumventing the rule. If you have another question on CV, otherwise I'll go elsewhere and then come back to you.
Let me try and ask this one. The former president is one of your referees. His Excellency, Jerry John Rawlings. Any special interest?
Well, he was the one who brought me into politics by appointing me from 1982 as an investigator to 1983 as a PNDC secretary. I served under him until January 2001. If there is anybody who will know me better, it must be him. And whatever anybody says about him, he reduced corruption and graft to the barest minimum. He didn't abolish it. And if I am an anti-corruption crusader who is defending the Constitution, who better than him? And I was really humbled when hours after my nomination, he came out to make those commendable comments about me. I mean, he's the only one who can say it. And the next fellow I put was Amonomoni. He was DPP who worked with me and knows my impartiality, my transparency, and fairness to all manner of people.
Yes. No, I'll kneel and tell before you. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, my first has to do with the nominee's answer to a question that he was a presidential advisor on legal matters during the era of President Atta Mills. I want to ask, as a presidential advisor, did you draw any salary?
Presidential advisors are on salary. I'm amazed this question is asked.
And you said
it's a government appointee on salary.
And you said you left because of discomfort. What sort of discomfort?
I said that I served for a brief while. Mr. Bakumen said the president's secretary will tell you that after not long, your friend is calling you. He says in the house, and each time I went there, decisions were torpedoed and changed. So my presence in the presidency there looked very uncomfortable. So I was sent to Interior. But even then, the secretary to the president will tell you, in a short while, your friend says you should come. So that was my rule. Indeed, until 13th of January 2012, when I had a problem with him, we never had a problem. He always sent for me. Lubako Mensah is alive. He see me talking. If I'm lying, he was so close to him as secretary to the president. He should tell the whole public.
Chairman, before the Honorable Nilante continues, Honorable Martin Amidu, the Hausa you just spoke, Abochinkawe Kaso, is that Ghana Hausa per your CV or Kano Hausa? Which of the houses?
It's Ghana Hausa.
Honorable nominee, are there differences in the Hausa? I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, when you hear Honorable Ayaraga speaking Hausa, there's a little difference, because when his father, my very good friend, went into exile with them, they learned the Hausa of that place. And then when he came and I got him a security pass to resettle, he brought them. So his Hausa is different from mine, which is a Boku one.
All right, Honorable Nilante, continue.
Mr. Chairman, I want the nominee. Mr. Chairman, I want the nominee to confirm at what age was he first appointed under the PNDC?
21st, I think, February 1983. So I should have been about 31, because I'm 1951. So by 81, 31st December, I would have been 30, I think. So it's just a matter of, I wasn't good at maths. I had to compensate for statistics in political science in Legon. So my calculations are very good.
Yes. Yes, I'm flowing from the answer the nominee gave. He said he assumed to be the leader of a delegation, a government delegation, and before you left, the structure did not tell you who the leader of the delegation was, so you assumed the position?
I was the leader of the delegation. What I've explained is that...
Honorable, please hold. He didn't say that. He said he was Attorney General. So naturally, he assumed that...
Mr. Chairman, normally the Attorney General leaves his office on delegation, and the letter which comes indicates that you are leading your delegation to the 10th anniversary of the International Criminal Court. So I went with the DPP and one principal state attorney. As Attorney General representing Ghana government to the United Nations, the ambassador received us and accompanied us to the meeting. And the only capacity in which I could have been leading that delegation was as Attorney General. Otherwise, I would have been functus officio.
Mr. Chairman, you see, the reason why I'm saying this is, for instance, something. The nominee has also assumed the position of a shadow vice president before. That's why I was flowing from that.
Honorable Eriko Boko, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my question is on the 35, 41, and 43 adults. I have with me here a write-up by the nominee under the title Okujeto Abrakwa is uncouth and uncultured in insulting errors.
When we finish with the CV.
It's on the CV.
On CV that...
Yeah, I'm relating it.
What is on the CV?
You let me learn, you get
No. We have
Chairman,
agreed on rules.
Okay.
So if you have a question relating to what is stated on the CV,
Okay.
Please, otherwise we'll come. You can ask
relate
any
it so that
question.
you get the input. No. I want to relate it to the issue here. It's very relevant. It's about, Mr. Chairman, it's about the issue of children. The nominee in this write-up has referred to his children, the last of the 3 children.
So refer to the children.
That's right. So let me read. The nominee wrote, the last of my 3 children, who was born on 31st December 1982, now has 2 children and is in Okujeto Abrakwa's peer group. And today he's here saying that the 3 are not children, they are adults. So how is he reconciling the 2 positions?
Mr. Chairman, this is simple. This child at that time was born on 31st December 1982. She was a child. And I said he's in his peer group. She's become an adult. I don't have any legal control over her. So that's the input. At the time she was born, she was my child. I looked after her to go to school. She's grown. She's a getting majority. She's married now with 2 children. There I go and say that I can do anything with her. That's the input.
Honorable Kujo.
Chairman, thank you. I go to item 9 on the CV, on the last page. The heading is hobbies. There is listed some hobbies knowing the nominee and his public image, which I expect him to espouse. And 1, cycling, walking, reading, which I really expect, and undertaking welfare activities. But the first one, listening to music, I would want to know the type of music the nominee listens to.
I like listening to local traditional music, either kusal or buli music. But I also enjoy any music which catches my fancy. When growing up, there are so many of them which I can't remember, but they are very fantastic.
Chairman, thank you. My follow-up question is, any music that catches or appears fancy to him, I would want to ask, a young, talented music just passed on recently, a couple of days.
That is not on the CV, please.
No, he listens to music.
Yes, he has explained.
Does he listen to the music of the young, talented?
When we come to the substance, when you want to ask, yes, Honorable Hello.
Thank you, Chairman. Still on the hobbies, I'd like to know what particular welfare activities he has undertaken. Thank you.
Well, I mentor a lot of people and help them in their type of needs. If you come to Medina, they will tell you most of the people in my community, when they have problems, they come to me. And that's why I'm even called citizen vigilante, because people have even misinterpreted to mean that if you have anything that you need assistance, you should go to Mr. Martin Amidu. And they do it. And even when I was invited to this meeting, amazing how many illiterate people wanted to come. But you see, constraint of numbers. So within my community, I help, both socially, politically, culturally, and all that. And in Boku, when I get home, it's like a market.
As Honorable Member for West.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, if you look at on 8, award, honors, optional, there is nil. Why nil? Despite the so many things you have done, why don't you have any award?
Honorable Mr. Chairman, I thank the honorable member for his question. Honorable, you know that since March 1983, when you became my colleague, ours was to dedicate ourselves to the service of this nation without, making any effort for recognition, because we joined the system not for awards, but for what we can do for the people. And if I'm right, you and I have lived that life and continue to live that life. That's why there's no award. I never lobbied for it. And I was given, in fact, people called me after my case in the Supreme Court and offered me awards. They've written to me. And I've told them it's not about Martin Amidu. It is about Ghana. Do emulate what I'm doing. Don't give me an award. The last was the Emmy Award, which they were giving me an award for anti-corruption. I wrote them and told them it's not about Martin Amidu. It is about emulating what I am doing so that Ghana will be better. So I don't want it to be personalized to me. So I don't take awards. Generally, I refuse them because I want it to be centered on the national need, of developing this country. And that is why you and I joined the PNDC, even though our objective is still eluding us.
Honorable nominee, let me be clear. So when you say optional nil, what you mean is that you have personally refused to receive the awards. That's what that means.
Those which were given to me by NGOs and all that. The government hasn't given me any award. I haven't tried to ask for one. I know people who took their law bar degrees from national awards. I am not one such person, But since I did the case in the Supreme Court, so many NGOs have offered me, even radio stations, some of them are here, TV stations have offered me. And I have told them it is not about Martin Amidu. It is about the nation Ghana. You see, I'm a very shy person. I don't like the limelight. Even sitting here is a problem for me with all these cameras looking on me. That's why, as a Minister of Interior, as Attorney General, you scarcely saw me in TV unless I'm doing a press conference or something. So that is the reason.
No, not the name. I just want to, because I was at home at the bar conference when you were awarded, even though you did not come to receive the award, but it was not indicated that you had rejected it. So I want to understand that the optional means that even though you have been recognized, you have declined to receive them.
Mr. Chairman, in Ho, I was told that there were going to be awards, and I said I would be unable to attend. You see, it's like the Emmy one. I had written I would be unable to attend, and they said send somebody to attend. So I had to write and say I just don't need, I'm not going to accept it. So that's the same thing. And no award really came from the bar conference. No physical thing came. It was announced and died with the wind.
Yes, Honorable Yelich.
Mr. Chairman, the name of the nominee is a problem. Was he born with these names or he acquired them as he went along? Martin Alamisi Benz Kaiser Amidu. I mean, what is that?
Mr. Chairman, normally, when I was born, my birthday was used to call me. That's Alamisi. That's because in some customs, they don't immediately name. And that Alamisi followed me. When I was baptized, I chose the name Martin. Amidu is my father's name. When we were in Bokomiru boarding, there was the picture of Sir Alan Benz. And everybody called me Alan Benz. Even today, my classmates call me Alan Benz. So I decided to call myself Benz. Then when I did history in commercial school, we did the German Kaiser. And Adamu Sedu and Co. all, as Dano preferred, when I'm going to talk, they'll say, silence, the Kaiser speaks. So I became Kaiser. And as I said, at one time in my life, I wanted to cancel all of them and be called Alamisi Amidu. Then when I got to law school, I read Gravin Williams. He says, what is there in a name? A name is a nonsense syllable. So if it's a nonsense syllable, why change it? So I left it.
Yes, Honorable Minority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to ask the nominee that in his earlier answer to the Executive Director of the not-for-profit Citizen Vigilance for Justice, he said he was one of the directors. Did I hear him right?
Yes.
Meaning there are other directors?
Surely. It's a registered company at the Registrar General. A search will disclose them.
Who are the other directors?
I'm saying a search will disclose them. Because I don't have their permission to name them.
Well, on page 3 of your CV, between 1993 to 2001, then again 2011 to 2012, you have served as a Minister of State. Did you declare your assets?
It would have been sacrilegious not to. It is a constitutional requirement. It's filed in the Auditor General's Department.
Between 1988 and January 1993, you served as Chairman, Public Agreement Board. What was the function for this group?
Mr. Chairman, I think I have indicated that the Public Agreements Board was set up under Section 42 of the Provisional National Defense Council Proclamation, Subsequential Provisions and Consequential Law 1983, PNDC Law 42. And my main job, in fact, the functions are clearly stipulated, the statutory. My main job was a gatekeeper against people, ministers and others trying to push through contracts and agreements which were not in the national interest. And indeed, before I was appointed, the chairman lasted 6 months. But when I was appointed, I lasted until we came into the constitutional regime. And the Honorable Lecturer will tell you that I was so meticulous with my members that unless the contract is in the national interest, I rejected it. And I had a lot of problems with senior ministers, PNDC members, but the president, the chairman of the PNDC, solidly behind me, and I did my job, and nobody has been accused of entering into a contract which was not in the national interest, because if anybody is to be prosecuted, it will be me who approved the agreement before the PNDC signed it. So that is, and also we were supposed to keep records of public agreements. I had a secretariat, and I suppose if the archives of the Attorney General's Department is working, all the minutes are there. And you find them there. I'll give you one example. SIC decided to enter into a contract with Elcom SIG for building of accommodation in Accra. We approved it. I was in Kumasi coming from the north when I heard over the air that the Minister for Works and Housing and the Chairman Committee of Secretaries had, inaugurated the board. When I came, I wrote a letter to the chairman of the PNDC and told him we hadn't approved it. A PNDC meeting was called, right? I was able to get the background of the companies from the UK. And it showed that the company which was coming to partner, the most viable financial institution in Ghana, had only £200 as stated capital. With all the PNDC secretaries and committee of chairman making the distance, PNDC refused it. That's the job I did. And that is why, if you want anybody who will be meticulous in investigation and prosecution, the president has made the best choice for you. But if you want somebody who will look the other way, just disapprove me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This chairmanship you serve at the time that you were also the Deputy Attorney General and Deputy Minister for Justice. Is that right?
That is so.
Again, Mr. Chairman, the nominee became chairman, subcommittee of National Investigations Committee appointed by the PNDC into financial irregularities and maladministration within the Social Security Bank Limited, July 1988 to September 1988. What was this about?
In fact, I was PNDC Deputy Secretary for Volta region. There had been a problem, so Kobna J came to take over from me in the Ministry of Industries, and I went there. Not long, there was a problem at SSB Bank, and the PNDC was looking for what Neo Kaja said, a hard-nosed fellow. And the chairman of the PNDC decided that his hard-nosed fellow to nose into this thing was me. So I was given additional responsibility for that investigation. But I will go to home, do my work, take a number of days, come and do the investigation. And that led to the reorganization of the Social Security Bank, which enabled us to divest it into SG, Society General today. At that time, it was a topical issue. The younger ones don't know how serious it was. But we did a good job. There's a white paper on it, and one just has to look at it and see how we did it without fear or favor, affection or ill will. Whether you were a friend or a foe, once you were liable, no, the grumble falls.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very well, honorable members. Now we will go into the main.
Yes.
Oh, leader, you want another?
I'll start with.
Chairman, let me now use this opportunity to congratulate the nominee and to wish him well. Honorable Martin Amidu, in your answer and in your narration of your discussion with the President of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa, you intimated to this committee that the values and ideals of accountability and transparency and wanting to fight graft and corruption inspires you to accept this nomination, but that there were certain wrongs with the law. I believe you are referring to the Office of the Special Prosecutor Act 2017, Act 959. What are the wrongs with the law that you see and as you wrote? Do you share them with us, and would you call for an immediate review and parliamentary amendment of those wrongs? Thank you.
In fact, as I said, it was a discussion between me and the president. And I called his attention to the fact that I had written a critique about the law. And I had made proposals that I didn't think that they must equate their position with that of the judiciary, which is in my critique. I made it abundantly clear. I didn't know whether that was in the law, right? But it turns out that it is in the law. So the question was, what do you do? So I said that, when he said that, look, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That meant that, in spite of what I said, once the Supreme Court hasn't made a ruling on it, and the law had been passed, and he wanted me to be his nominee, it meant I had to subject myself to approval of Parliament. And once I had nothing to hide, I said, no problem. My problem was a problem of constitutional principle. But if it has been passed, what's the problem? And you recognize that Trump, US President Trump, signed the Russian sanctions law with a memorandum saying that he believed it was unconstitutional. And yet it is the law. So that's one of the things I mentioned to the president about. But nonetheless, thought that it is better to fight the canker ourselves in a democratic regime than to allow it to fester, and some opportunists will use it as an excuse as has been used in the past. So that was the main issue which came up for discussion.
Chairman, what I want to appreciate from the nominee, do you see anything wrong with the Office of the Special Prosecutor Act 2017, Act 959, as assented to by the President?
What I will want to say is that I have made critique about the bill, right? Most of it has been taken care of. Most of it. And I've given you an example of what wasn't taken care of. And I understand the pressures Parliament was from civil society, right? Who thought that a certain perception should be taken. As far as I'm concerned, the law is in its current form, is doable. And as I wrote in my critique, what the president was suggesting was doable. And as long as it's doable, I go with it. Because if you have fought corruption and its allied friends since your infancy, and this is the only opportunity to try to see whether you can excise the canker, don't throw away the water, the dirty water, with the baby.
Chairman, in the nominee introduction, I'm paraphrasing him again, you said there were slippages and leakages, and therefore your commitment to fight graft and corruption. However, you ended with a reference that since 1992, is that to suggest that from independence we have not had those slippages and leakages?
Chairman, I have said that one of the reasons given for the various coup d'etats are corruption. And these are slippages and leakages. What I meant by 1993 is the fourth Republican Constitution, which is supposed to be the last constitution for Ghana, right? So if in the past there were these slippages and leakages which resulted in people being shot at the firing squad by no less a regime by the PNDC, the June 4th regime, which metamorphosed later into the PNDC under which I served, and whose ideals was to prevent it. I am committed to make sure that what I started as a young man and served until January 2003, 7 January 2003, that's when the constitutional rule came into force. And the Constitution says accountability, transparency, the rule of law will be respected. So that's what I mean by from 93, that is within the constitutional regime.
Chairman, that's appreciated. May I take the nominee to Section 4 of the Office of the Special Prosecutor Act 2017, and with the chairman's indulgence, I quote, except as otherwise provided in the Constitution, the office is not subject to the direction and control of a person or an authority in the performance of the functions of the office. However, 4.2, Chairman, and that's where my emphasis is, and that's where I'll drive my question from. Subject to Clause 4 of Article 88 of the Constitution, the office shall, for the purpose of this Act, be authorized by the Attorney General to initiate and conduct the prosecution of corruption and corruption-related offenses. Walk this committee through how you intend to work with the Attorney General to realize the fundamental objectives of this Act.
Chairman, if you go back to my critique and look at page 8, I said that the Special Prosecutor Office Act will not be constitutional unless the Special Prosecutor works under the authority of the Attorney General. And in fact, there are legal decisions which interpret what working under the authority is. It doesn't mean that the Special Prosecutor loses its independence. So that's the way I see it. The Attorney General, by Article 88, has been given certain powers, right? Unless you change the Constitution, a special prosecutor can be made independent and work under her authority. It has a different meaning from the meaning many people ascribe to it. And if you read that, my critique, you will see that I've quoted Namibian and Trinidad and Tobago cases which interpret what authority accounting are. So that's why I supported that as a basis for drafting the bill.
So how independent do you conceive you will be from the Attorney General established under Article 88 of the Constitution?
Mr. Chairman, I act from precedent, and I act also from persuasive precedents. When the Parliament was drafting this act, I emailed an article by Kevin Stack to the clerk to the committee so that the ranking member and the chairman of the committee will have an insight on the American position. And it is clear that even under the code of ethics of lawyers in Ghana, every lawyer is an independent contractor. If you sell your conscience to your colleague lawyer, you are subject to discipline by the disciplinary committee. So I get amazed when I'm told that lawyers have been directed by the Attorney General to do that, but when I was Attorney General, I never directed anybody. I discussed with you. If you had a strong feeling that you couldn't do it for ethical reasons, I took the docket. I went to Supreme Court on a number of cases because my lawyers, some of them, had a strong feeling. So anybody, any lawyer who just takes blind instructions from the Attorney General, I'll call a zombie and acting contrary to the ethics of the legal profession of Ghana. The American position stays the same thing. And the questioner is a lawyer. And you know that. A lawyer is an independent contractor. A lawyer who succumbs to the views of the other when he strongly feels about it has abdicated his position and subject to discipline.
Chairman, my last on the post-CV, and as the President stated in his State of the Nation address, uncharted waters of Office of Special Prosecutor as part of many instruments to combat economic criminality and white crime in Ghana. Will you share with this House, in addition to this legal instrument, what other strategies and modalities will you work with to combat corruption in Ghana as is permeated every aspect of our public life, from the police officer on the street to the civil and public servants who is delaying process? What will you do in addition to this legislation to deal with white-collar criminality?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have stated in my 25-page critique that we have to give this thing a trial. And then I stated there that the Ethics in Governance Act 1974 of the USA has gone through many tribulations, and it was not renewed in 1999, to call attention for the fact that we have to set up strong institutions if we must succeed. If we don't set up a strong institution, we are going to replicate the Office of the Special Prosecutor as we did with other institutions. We will have a problem. The way forward I see it is that the Act permits us to set up departments that will help us to do our work. I think that it will not be prudent when I have not been approved to begin talking about what divisions I will set up, what I will not set up. But when my deputy, when I'm appointed and my deputy is appointed and the board is appointed and we have a complement of staff, I will lead them to explore ways of even catching the thief, so that if my employees, are taking bribe, I'll have a way of knowing that they are. There are various ways in intelligence and security to do this. The FBI and other bodies have done it. We will do it. You know, so it's not going to be a situation in which you think that working in my office is just a holiday. No, 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 we shall make sure that if you get into it, we'll hold you there. Because Caesar's wife must be above suspicion, and when you approve of me, I must be the first one above suspicion. I have demonstrated it before in positions I have held, and I'm going to make sure that I myself am above suspicion. That is the basis on which we can eradicate corruption in this country.
Very well, honorable members, as we discussed, yes, Honorable Ayaga, you have 3 questions.
Thank you very much, Chairman. When I earlier asked about his hometown, it was to enable me to recuse myself, but he gave me a security pass when he said the record showed that his hometown is Kadima. So I am permitted to ask questions. So one quick question. You were chairman Public Agreements Board from December 1988 to January 1993. And as chairman, you were the gatekeeper of all government or agreements in relation to the government of Ghana. Then you became the Deputy Attorney General and Deputy Minister for Justice from 1993 for the first NDC, the second NDC, 2001, making it 8 years. So comparing your roles as the gatekeeper, checking the contracts before they are entered into, and being a Deputy Minister for Justice, which is being legal advisor and prosecuting and dealing with the offense when it has been committed. In your experience, which has been the most effective in fighting graft and corruption in public office?
Mr. Chairman, thieves, first and foremost, fear, experience, tested and credible investigators whom they cannot influence. That's the way to reduce crime. When the investigator, you know, is very experienced, very credible, has the capabilities to find wrong, you would not do it. So as chairman of Public Agreements Board, I tried to stop most of these things. But as I said, I had a lot of problems. And so when the Constitution came into force and PNDC Law 42 lapsed, I was too happy because I didn't have to quarrel with my colleagues who thought that the best way was to cut corners. So I stuck to my work as Deputy Attorney General. And I remember being told that Parliament will handle it. So you go and sit somewhere. So I sat somewhere. But I still helped the Attorney General to review agreements. And the records are there. If you go and look at the agreements I reviewed, they will tell you that I say it as it is. This is not in the national interest, and therefore don't do it. Mr. Chairman, even as Attorney General, when the Chinese loan was brought to Parliament without my concurrence, I wrote a letter to the council to say I had not given my approval. Honorable Joe Ajaho, I remember, as Deputy Speaker, said that unless they got my concurrence, he will not sit on it. So it had to be brought to me for review. I reviewed it. Before it came to Parliament, it was passed. That is my track record. This country is not a milking cow. It is for the people of this country, particularly the downtrodden and poor ones. And I'm saying that that's my position. It will be, whether I am approved or not, I will continue to fight for the people of this country.
Second one. As Attorney General and as Deputy Attorney General. It's your job to advise or to approve government agreements before they are passed on by cabinet to Parliament for ultimate approval. Because I just heard, I don't know if I heard you right, because you said you hadn't approved as Minister for Justice, or said that you hadn't reviewed as Minister for Justice. Which of them?
The Minister for Justice is supposed to review an agreement and write a letter giving his opinion. In that opinion, he can say that the agreement is not in the national interest. You will be a little something upstairs if you went ahead and passed an agreement which your Attorney General says it hasn't passed the test. And let me give you one example. The Cotton case. We had said that the matter should go to Parliament for a second time. We wrote to the Minister for Finance. Mrs. Grace Olins felt so strongly about it. She passed the letter through me. I sent it to Dr. Obeda Samoa. He sent the letter to Minister of Finance. They didn't listen to us and went ahead and approved it. When we're out of power, what happened? When we're out of power, what happened? Do you blame somebody when the Attorney General has told you, go to Parliament a second time, and you think that you are a minister, so you know about more than the Attorney General? You mess yourself up. When they went to court, the evidence was that even the Attorney General had advised them to go to Parliament a second time. So the Attorney General doesn't approve. By his word, is weighty. And only somebody bent on suicide would ignore it.
And you sound like between 1993 to 2001, there were significant governmental agreements that you had strong disagreements in relation to, which somehow still went ahead and got done. We lived with the consequences. But why didn't you fight them to prevent them from being done, instead of allowing them to be done so that one day we will live with the consequences?
Mr. Chairman, I never used the word significant. I give an example of one. That's all I did, because I didn't want to give many examples. But I gave example of one. And we are colleague ministers. I was deputy minister. The Attorney General was there. I passed a memo to him. He signs the memo. I see it on the float. Right? It goes. We even send a cousin of the minister, a woman, to go and talk to him. They still ignored it. So what were we to do? They were debating with us that it didn't need to go to Parliament. Right? That was an interpretative issue. Did we have to go to court to interpret it? So we left it at that. And then when others thought it wasn't so, they decided to deal with it. But I was then Deputy Attorney General. And all I had to do was to state my case very strongly, which I did.
My last question is, you've risen to the highest in terms of the bar, being the Attorney General and Minister for Justice. And now you are going to be Special Prosecutor. Can you tell me what is significantly different between the job of Special Prosecutor and the DPP at the Attorney General's office? What is so special in terms of the Special Prosecutor's role? What powers, what is it that the Special Prosecutor will be able to do that under Office of the Special Prosecutor Act, the Attorney General the investigators and the legal system of Ghana did not cater for? What is so radically different about special prosecutor?
Mr. Chairman, my 25-page critique, which was sent to the committee which drafted the law, has covered extensively the questions he has asked. But let me say this. I have made the argument that the Attorney General should be strengthened. The DPP should be strengthened. I gave examples of Namibia, where the Director of Public Prosecution is independent. I gave all those examples. But I said that once the President had given his word, and because of that word of fighting corruption, the population of Ghana decided to vote him overwhelmingly in power, he has a moral obligation to fulfill the promise, right? So if he wants to set up this special prosecutor office in fulfillment of that office, he should do it within the Constitution. What will be different between the special prosecutor's office and whatever office of law enforcement? And the reason why I agreed to accept the nomination is that this is a new office. Corruption has done so much damage to this country. In the conflict resolution, it is called structural violence. It's an invisible violence that kills millions without anybody seeing it. Taking millions of cedis for oneself under illegal circumstances deprives people of good health, education, and all the developmental facilities you can give. So what I want to do is to be able to set up a credible institution with a credible culture, which will be able to block the leakages and the seepages. If I'm able to do that, I don't care even whether I am not able to prosecute anybody. And part of the law says that it is preventative, right? So if I can put the machinery in place to prevent these leakages and seepages, I can assure you that if we succeed, we won't need foreign aid. I will say, with knocking my chest, that the amount of seepages and leakages at the ports, if we were to close them, our budget will not need foreign assistance. And that is why I accepted this job, to try to help the people of this country, to see whether what I started fighting as a child can at least be realized to some extent, in the hope that whoever takes over from me will keep the spirit. And so I can go to my maker knowing very well that my colleagues who died during the PNDC did not die in vain. And that when I beat them, they will say, Martin, you did well for us, even though you didn't succeed. Thank you. And that is where President Roosevelt talks about the man in the arena. I don't know how many of you have read it, but if you go and open, Mr. Chairman, if you want, I'll just read it quickly for you. The man in the arena.
My members fear that we may not be able to finish today.
Yeah, but
I want us to finish.
Anybody can Google it.
Yes, we can Google it.
And you will see that I am the man in the arena. I'm muddying myself. I'm dirtying my face so that they can be changed. There are critics and all that. But at least I'm trying. It is not for those who have not tried to criticize, but it is the one who has muddied, bloodied, and dirtied himself in pursuit of a higher object who takes the credit.
Mr. Chairman, but the man in the arena doesn't nod his chest as you are doing. Are we safe that you won't settle this matters the Bulsa way?
I am quoting,
knowing that you are from Kadima, give an assurance to this committee.
I think that it is unacceptable for the minority leader to use a tribal epic to describe a whole people. I think that that is a little bit, no, it's offensive to the tribe, you know, and I think that it is not fair. What is settling the Bulsawi? What does it mean? I mean, you are in the Bomba, you don't talk like that about
I direct that part be taken off the record. He intended it as a joke. I think if the Bulsa way is offensive,
he should not make derisive remarks about Bulses. I will never do that about the Gombes.
Chairman, let the record reflect that the reference to Bulsa Way is taking off the record. No, you're done. You're done. Honorable member for Kajebi, Karachi East, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask the nominee, when he was nominated by the president. In fact, it generated a lot of debate in the media. Will you say that it was an opportunity to say that the president is having an all-inclusive government, in view of the fact that you are coming from the other side of the divide?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think I will be surprised if the president was looking for other side of the divide sentence. But even though, he knew my pedigree, right? But I think that he has made a promise. And I think he was looking for somebody, from his own speech, he was looking for somebody who would be unbiased, would be fair, impartial, in dealing with the situation with regard to political correlation. I think, for me, that is the word of honor I got from him. And as a distinguished lawyer, with whom I practice at the bar, I take words of honor from very senior lawyers seriously. That is why I reciprocated with my word of honor. And I will be surprised if he will breach his word of honor. So I am coming to do a job which does not require politics at all. Crime is crime. I wrote it on 12th of January 2012. And that political party cards must not be an insurance against crime. And that is it, period.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I also want to ask, the nominee cannot do the job alone. He needs competent people, as he stated. The sub-institutions that are going to work under him. 19 of the Act says that we need to have the investigation division. Then the C also says that we need to look at the prosecution division. Can you share with us what you're going to do to make sure that you get the quality that you need to be able to investigate and also prosecute?
Mr. Chairman, this is a good question, but you see, I've been accused of personalizing things and acting one man. This is going to be an office, and I would rather think that we should wait for the full component of the office so that knowledge will be shared, and then we will do a collective action. But one thing I wish to assure you is that we will employ investigators who must be independent and impartial. Prosecutors must be independent and impartial. We will take them through vetting, and I'm hoping that civil society and donor community who are all interested in the excising the canker will help us to put in place the best staff and instill the best culture so that when I leave, it should be able to go on. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, your last.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I want to continue from where you ended. When you leave, it should be able to go on. When the bill was passed into an act on January 3rd, there were speculations trying to think about who other can be the choice of the president until your name was mentioned. So when you leave, can you share with us people in Ghana you think are of your quality?
Disallowed.
Okay, thank you. No, I'm not done.
I have one more opportunity.
In your CV, you were handling a non-profit organization.
How do you finance it? Handling it in court where you have to file with costs incurred and other stuff. How do you finance it?
Unfortunately, it was set up 17th of September 2017. It hasn't undertaken any serious activity. When I was invited and this offer made, so it hasn't acted. But before then, I was doing most of the things from the little Senate benefits I was getting, and then from the little money I had collected when I left office, even though much of it is still outstanding. So that's how I went to court. I never accepted donations because I didn't want anybody to influence what I was doing. And even after I had won the cases, people wanted to give me money. I said no. You didn't send me there to go and do it. Don't try to take part of the credit by giving me money after the fact. I don't need it.
Something I hear or something. Honorable, I'll come to you after. Yes, Honorable Samson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the Honorable nominee is quoted to have said that NDC appointed Charlotte Osei to rig elections. That article, he went on to quote him, she was appointed by a corrupt government precisely because of her incompetence. That made her susceptible for use for an election rigging agenda. Can the nominee provide evidence for this assertion? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the problem is that there are privileges here, so we can ask questions and get away with it. I can give answers and get away with it. But I'm immune once I'm sitting here, you see. But the subject person you are talking about is cases are sub judice before an investigatory commission. And it would not be fair when there is no adversarial approach here in whatever I will say and a response from her. As a lawyer, it will be the worst thing you can do to her. I would have wished that at the time I said this, and during the time the government was in power and I was saying this, they had asked their CID to pick me up, and then I'll make a statement, and then we would have seen whether they could have won the case in court against me or not. But it is too late in the day. When they were afraid that because I'm from the same pond with them, or I was stepping on some stool, which I could throw. But I don't think it is fair for anybody, for me, when the fellow's case is sub judice before a committee, to come and be talking about it.
I have two more opportunities.
I can ask several Mr. Chairman, I think that the matter that I raised was about the appointment of Mrs. Charlotte Osei. Not the case at the court. That NDC appointed her to rig elections. This is not in court.
No, it's in court. Honorable Samson Ahe. Honorable members.
This is not in court.
Honorable members, the nominee's answer is that if he was to provide the information he has, it will be prejudicial to the investigations. I'm not in a position to rule on his statement because I don't know the information he has. And I think his answer is acceptable. If you proceed to ask for, he has the floor, still has the floor. So please proceed. Please, let's work in accordance with the rules we agreed. You will get your turn. If you want to do a follow-up on that, you get your turn. Please, Amzahi.
Proceed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, again, the nominee is quoted to have said that former President Mahama is sabotaging corruption fights in Ghana. And to quote him, he noted that President Akufo-Addo's inability to tackle corruption as promised is due to the NDC moles in the ministries who are misadvising the ministers responsible for dealing with issues with corruption. Can he tell us how he came to that former President Mahama, who is out of office, is sabotaging the effort of the president to fight corruption in this country?
Yes, if the statement he made is true, anybody can say that it is defamatory, right? So I don't think that I want to answer that question in the face of this parliament. I have made statements about President Mahama's government. They're on my webpage. He was in government. He could have dealt with it. He didn't deal with it. And I'm not going to answer this question after he's out of office.
Chairman, I decide which one you answer or not. Sorry, Honorable Nominee.
Very
but
well.
Can you listen to me? Were you stating a fact or writing an opinion? If it is a fact, then you're liable to substantiate it. If it's an opinion,
I was stating a perception.
Yes, Honorable, proceed.
Perception from what context? What is follow-up?
Anyway, Mr. Chairman, in the critiques of the honorable nominee, he indicated that the establishment of the Office of Special Prosecutor, Special Prosecutor Office as a body corporate, only serves to add another bureaucratic layer to the prosecutorial authority of the AG. He went on to say that the AG office is seriously understaffed and underfunded, and that the budget will be burdened further with the creation of the office in issue. Are those views still relevant, especially when the clause 1 of the bill you critiqued was maintained in the Act as Section 1?
Mr. Chairman, as you call it, it's a critique.
It is said, a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man alive. An apt description, or much ado about nothing. But before he can wield the axe, he must square it off with the Appointments Committee. Will the nomination of this fearless man pull through, or will there be a shocker? Don't lose a minute of this historical face-off. Only time will tell. It is said, a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man alive. An apt description, or much ado about nothing. But before he can wield the axe, he must square it off with the Appointments Committee. Will the nomination of this fearless man pull through, or will there be a shocker? Don't lose a minute of this historical face-off. Only time will tell. It is said, a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man alive. An apt description, or much ado about nothing. But before he can wield the axe, he must square it off with the Appointments Committee. Will the nomination of this fearless man pull through, or will there be a shocker? Don't lose a minute of this historical face-off. Only time will tell.
look at Act 959. I don't know whether you have your copy here.
My papers are many, but go ahead.
Yes. And I want us to start with Section 71 on plea bargaining. There are various provisions on plea bargaining under Section 71 of the Act 959. If I may be permitted to read just some aspects of it. 71.1 says, a person under investigation or charged with corruption or a corruption-related offense may voluntarily A, admit the offense and make an offer of restitution, or B, admit the offense and offer to provide information that will aid in the arrest and prosecution of other persons whom that person knows have committed or about to commit corruption or a corruption-related offense. Now, the special prosecutor is giving more or less a blank check as to whether to accept the offer of restitution or consider if the offer is acceptable to the prosecution, even though eventually the court may come in. If you look at 71.4, in considering whether the offer is acceptable, you are required to look at the history, level of cooperation, willingness, likelihood of obtaining a conviction, etc. One, what's your general opinion about this provision? And two, how do we prevent abuse under this provision?
Mr. Chairman, we should go back and look at the offenses the special prosecutor can prosecute. Out of the 10 offenses listed with the general provision that other offenses, 6 of them are misdemeanors, 2 are felonies, 2 are unclassified. So for me, the issue is not necessarily wanting to fill in Sawam with people. One of the issues of prison administration is to reduce the number there so that we don't spend money feeding people whom we shouldn't feed. So I see this plea bargaining thing as a good incentive for those who want to make reparation for the consideration of the court and go and sin no more. The office will have to take into consideration all the grounds upon which reparation must be accepted. And the reparation must be reasonable, because the reparation eventually will come to the knowledge of the people of this country. Even though we can't ask all of them questions, in doing that, our minds will be tuned to what is reasonable. And when we get something which is reasonable, the court will endorse it. And we are hoping that if we can get monies back, what's the use imprisoning him when you can't get the money back? If he agrees to get the money back only for a conviction and probation, I think that is better for the nation than imprisoning him 10 years, feed him 10 years, give him prison clothing, and then he may have, if he is grown, he will have chronic conditions, and you'll be sending him to hospital up and down, and the president may be compelled to give him an early pardon. So if he will bring part of the money or all of it back, and it's reasonable, that is the thing I love about this section. So that those who think that the office is just going to be there locking people left, right, and center, will realize that the office will act reasonably. And it's only cases which is in the national interest after investigation to prosecute, that will be prosecuted. But when people realize they are false and say, me a culpa, through my fault, through my most grievous fault, please, I will pay reparation. Why not? I mean, even God forgives, let alone we. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, the second question will be on Section 77, mutual legal assistance. The section says the Mutual Legal Assistance Act 2010, Act 807 applies. With your experience as Attorney General, a long-standing experience, Deputy Attorney General. I'm sure you are aware that this section is to look at how persons in public office may want to send their assets abroad, including funds. With your experience, how do you think we can benefit from this?
We can benefit enormously from this. You know, there is an international something on politically exposed persons. And if you even open an account in certain countries like the UK and America, they ask you to fill a declaration of consent that if questions are asked about you, the bank is at liberty to provide them. Right? So mutual legal assistance gives us the opportunity for those who think they are smart enough to put their monies and go through the Kotoka International Airport because they are exempted from very critical screening and deposit them abroad. We will trace them, right? And then they will have to decide whether they will come and pay reparation or bring the money back, or we deal with it. I don't want to talk. I was Minister of Interior, so I know the security and intelligence methods of doing it. We will use these methods. So those who think that they've hidden something abroad, maybe they don't need to approve me. Because if they do, I will find it. I have the capability. I've done it before, and under my if you approve me, it will be done.
Thank you. Last question, Mr. Chairman. Yes, back to the Act. I noticed under Section 80, consequential amendments, that indeed Section 54 of the Criminal and Other Offences Procedure Act has been amended. And in amending, it says where the special prosecutor enters a nolle prosequi under subsection 1, the special prosecutor shall state reasons for doing so. What would you say about this? What's your observation here?
Well, this is what Parliament has said. Normally, when you enter nolle prosequi, you do. When the Attorney General enters nolle prosequi, it doesn't state reasons. But this Honourable Parliament decided that maybe the special prosecutor must be able to explain why he's entering it. He might have taken some cut and wants to withdraw it. So pin him to give a reason so that if it's not reasonable, the public will know. The mistake is that it hasn't stated that the special prosecutor cannot withdraw a case he's prosecuting. You know, you can withdraw the charge, which is almost the same as a nolle prosequi. But you see, the Act goes for nolle prosequi and left the other hand. You know, so there's that lacuna, which maybe in due time we will have to consider what we really want.
Right. I was going to ask you, do you think that we should add even withdrawal of a charge to?
I think it is cumbersome, you know, because if you bring a charge and then you realize that there's no evidence to convict, why will you? Look, in the first place, to charge a person is to put the fellow under stress, his family under stress. Right? He has to go to expense to hire a lawyer to defend himself. The state has to spend money on the trial. A judge will have to sit. Prosecutors will have to be assigned. Right? So if you start prosecuting and then it shows that some of the witnesses perjured themselves, right, or their evidence is not maintainable, why do you waste state funds to continue? You should be able to withdraw. If your hands are tied and you want to continue, you continue, you'll be convicted, and the state loses more. So I think that it is good for every prosecutor to have the ability to withdraw, because you see, that discretion has principles that govern it. You don't look for victims. You look for people who have committed offenses contrary to the national interest. So I don't think we should put it in law. Even for me, this whole thing about giving reasons for nolle prosequi, well, it's there, so we will follow it. Otherwise, I would have thought that the original position should have stood. But once it's in the law, it must be obeyed.
Very well. Obi, you are done. No, I had promised Honorable Helu after, and I'll get to you. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Congratulations, nominee. You were an active member of NDC, and actually in the year 2000, you were vice presidential candidate. I'd like to know whether you are still a member of NDC. And if you are, what are your views about the appointment of a special prosecutor whose political coloration is well known? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. If you read Section 3 of the Criminal Offences Act, the definition of a public officer includes a potential public officer. So when the president nominated me and announced it to the whole world, I became a potential public officer, recognized under the criminal code as a public officer. So as far as I'm concerned, since that day, I'm neutral. That's why you've not heard my voice over the air saying anything, because I'm coming to an office which has to be neutral and impartial. Yes, I have been a leading member of the NDC. I will never regret it. That was my contribution towards national development. But I have been nominated. That I'm a potential public officer. From that day, I have to maintain neutrality. That is what I'm maintaining. If you approve me and I'm sworn in, then I'll even be more bound. There have been many things that has gone on, I would have replied. But because of my neutrality, I've been gagged. The president gagged me since 11th of January, you know. And when I become special prosecutor, even if there's anything I dislike, I can't write about it. That's the cost.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really want to know from you whether he has resigned from NDC or he's still a member.
Mr. Chairman, one doesn't need to resign. The Supreme Court has held that while you are a public officer, you cannot take part in party politics. I think it involved Dr. Ajay and Co. I did that case in the Supreme Court. So I don't need to. No, even when you are a potential public officer, you are supposed to exhibit neutrality. So I don't need to make a formal resignation of anything. It's by operation of law.
Okay, we are interested in knowing if you still hold a membership card of NDC.
Mr. Chairman.
Honorable, hold on. Won't you want to do another one? Because the answer won't change. And the point he's making is that by operation of law, he is not enabled to identify with any political party. Whether he holds a card as dated yesterday or not is another matter. So if I were you, I'll ask another question.
And I hope it's not a question. These are all follow-ups to the first question. Yeah, they were follow-ups. So I
promise to be flexible, but not this lengthy process. Please.
Follow-up. Yes, I know that the nominee has written many articles, and I hope that you remember this particular one. The title of the article is Amidu vowed to Mills to ensure that the government complied with the 1992 Constitution, dated 14 August 2017. He was purported to have said that, and I quote, "It is against my northern custom for anybody to invite a senior brother's wife and wants the junior brother to implicate her in her presence." The quotation goes on, and he says, "Call me ethnocentric, but I was born in the northern region, in the northern territory, sorry." These are very profound statements. and suggestive to me and to many people that there could be possible bias if your appointment is approved, possible bias on your part in dealing with issues that concern family, tribe, ethnic groups, and so on. So can you just explain to us what the situation is?
Mr. Chairman, I was reacting to a situation where young people who didn't know historical facts were making accusations. So, and I didn't want to state all the facts. So I gave an inkling into what took place. To say that I'm from the Northern Territories and somebody's wife, my brother's wife, these are matters of fact. And nobody can take away from me the fact that I was born in the Northern Territories of the British Protectorate. Nobody can take away the fact that this country became Ghana when after the plebiscite. They are facts, but we are Ghanaians and we are learning to build a nation. We don't throw away custom. It is custom that makes our identity. And I'm saying that you can never get me to tell you about my brother's wife in her presence when I have written to you officially and mentioned her name. That's all it's about. That doesn't depict bias. I have written a whole letter. Mama Ayarga, the Honorable Mama Ayarga, when he was on about it, I gave the letter and he was invited to a friend's house to read it. Right? He knows I mentioned all the names. So when he called me and wanted me to say it, I didn't think it was prudent. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't make me biased when I've named the name in a letter. And then you call me before the fellow. Is this the fellow you mean? I mean, what is that? It doesn't make me biased. If it were making me biased, I wouldn't have written officially in my capacity as Attorney General, naming names. So I can't be biased. I am fair. Even if you are my brother, I will deal with you if you breach the law, even if I have to hire a lawyer for you.
We thank the nominee for that assurance. We shall be looking up, watching critically to ensure that there is nothing to show ethnicity, because we are all against that kind of
Honorable, that's your last opportunity.
Oh, I have one more.
No, it's actually
It's follow-up.
Please, this is the 5th question you're asking. So 2 are follow-ups, but please, this is your last question.
Yeah,
Please
the last
proceed.
one. The last one is about, it's taken from his critique of the Office of the Special Prosecutor Bill. And in it, he said that I am fortified in the belief that the attempt to pull a fast one on Ghanaians by the insertion of Clause 3.4 of the bill to negate the fight against corruption is the work of a strong and powerful cabal within the government. I hope he remembers that. We want to know, maybe you might not mention this, but who are these powerful cabals? And how do you intend to counteract the activities of this powerful cabal within the government? Because if these people are so strong to even influence the bill to their advantage, you are going to a position where these people may have a leeway. How are you going to deal with this cabal? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I was writing upon credible intelligence. You know, intelligence is not necessarily evidence. And I'm happy that because of the manner in which I wrote it, civil society were able to convince Parliament to remove the fact that we are only to prosecute, or the special prosecutors prosecute only corruption of a certain magnitude. So that when somebody steals plantain, he can go for 5 years. And yet when somebody takes 200,000 for a bribe, he can walk away. I think I achieved that objective. If anybody, I've said it time with that number, commits a corruption offense, he will not be, I will not see him as a member of a political party. I'll see him as a suspected criminal. It's pure and simple. And that's how I would deal with the fellow. Crime is crime, and the president repeated it. Crime is crime without political correlation. And that is how the office will be dealt with, will be supervised if I am approved. Indeed, as I've said, the fact that you know me, if you come to talk to me about it, I may order your arrest, because under section 239, trying to directly or indirectly influence the special prosecutor as a public officer is corruption. Many Ghanaians don't know that. So we'll try to be as impartial as possible, as humanly as possible. We are going to try to be the moral compass, and will be the gatekeepers, so that nobody will say the ask is casting one way. You know, so the best thing is, if the office is set up, stop it. If you don't stop it, and the law gets with you, and it's so serious in the national interest to prosecute you, and you don't offer to say I've sinned, I will pay, who will prosecute you? I hope I've answered your question.
Very well. Now, Honorable Minister for Defense.
Thank you very much.
Take the Minister of Defense.
Don't create more trouble. First of all, let me thank the nominee. I think I've been listening to him this morning, and to me he appears very consistent with his views. So let me congratulate you first on your nomination. Your nomination was one of the things that, apart from maybe football and the military, that received the broad support of every Ghanaian. And so I think that it was very good for me and for you and for the people of Ghana that this novel and Uncharted Waters, your nomination received a lot of support. Even though some people had issues with it, I'll leave that to their conscience. But there's just this little issue that I wanted you to correct, but I will not ask you to correct. I just listen to me and then I'll move on with my questions. It has to do with a joke that we all thought was permissible in Ghana, the Bulsa way. Until this morning, I thought it was very permissible. In fact, I've used it several times. If I was not in this vetting, I may have used it on somebody else. It could have created a problem for me. So I thought it was really a joke that normally Ghanaians, especially widows from the north, will joke. I know that halfway in the same district is generated in one of the schools, the Bulsa way and that kind of stuff. So really, I thought it was a joke until this morning. Maybe you were also joking, so I'll leave it at that. But, Mr. Chairman, like I said, the Gadis have and Farfars have this dog thing they always fight about, and Concombes and the Mobes, the B-Mobes, that British Mobile have this issue of cowtail, this man. Gonjas and Farfars. I always thought that it's like that, but I'll leave it at that. And maybe one day we'll talk about it over a pot of pito. But, Mr. Chairman, let me read a quotation from one of his papers. I want to know whether it is attributable to him before I ask a question. It is a quote. The Constitution has clearly delineated the type of public officers who shall be appointed by the President with the approval of Parliament. Public officers in the category of special prosecutor do not fall under that category. It is unconstitutional for Parliament to partake in the approval, and it is the exclusive appointment powers of the President. Is it really something that you wrote and you stand by it now, that you think that Parliament should not vet you and that only the President should do that?
I wrote it in the 25-page critique. It is there, and if you remember, at the beginning, I answered the question myself by saying that I raised it with the President because Parliament was now requiring that the fellow should be of the same conditions as a Court of Appeal judge and be subjected to Parliament, approval by Parliament. And then the issue was, should we throw away the dirty water with the baby? And I said, it is, for me, with the president's own commitment, it was more important to fight the canker than to worry about principles of constitutionality, particularly when the president had called my attention to the fact that once Parliament had passed it, which I knew myself, until the Supreme Court declares it unconstitutional, that is the law. I agreed with him entirely. And I have said to this House that I didn't want anybody to think that it was because I may be afraid of vetting. That was why I wrote it. That's why I'm subjecting myself to your vetting. It wasn't, I was writing this as a matter of constitutional law, which I thought. But Parliament thought otherwise. The President is not the Supreme Court. I am not the Supreme Court. As I indicated, President Trump minuted that a law he was signing was unconstitutional, yet he signed it.
Thank you very much. That was your view. Maybe that's not your view today. So let's move on. Parliament has thought otherwise, so you are complying with it. The other issue, Mr. Chairman, that I wanted the nominee to look at is the current practice that we have in Ghana of newspaper trials. When somebody is accused of any crime, whether it's corruption, it's particularly corruption, the investigative bodies leak, let me use that word, leak the information to the press for the person to first be tried in the newspapers. By the time the person goes to court and have his say, he's totally destroyed. His credibility is gone. In fact, some people have collapsed. Some may have even died, and some have never recovered from the fact that they are prosecuted in the newspapers, they are maligned and insulted. At the end, they are free. But they have no name any longer. They have no credibility any longer. I want to ask you, if this House recommends you and you are approved by the main House, if this committee and you are approved by the main House and ultimately sworn in by the President, what sort of internal rules will you set in to ensure that this prosecutor's office, special prosecutor's office, that has received broad support from every Ghanaian, does not suffer the fate that we're currently suffering? Just last week, one happened. A similar thing happened. I'll come to that question of the Auditor General's report, because it's a different question. So how are you going to ensure that your office does not follow that same principle of getting information out that we are investigating this person, this is what the person has done, he's prosecuted, he's maligned, he's insulted, he may be free, but then he's totally finished. If he has business partners, he has no more credibility any longer. How will you be able to convince us that that's what you will do? Will be able to at least do your work and allow the person to have his say in court?
Mr. Chairman, all I can say is that I don't subscribe to people being tried by the press, because every Ghanaian is entitled to presumption of innocence, and it is the responsibility of the prosecution to prove his guilt beyond every reasonable doubt. He has no obligation to prove his innocence. So, if you watch, when I was Deputy Attorney General, Minister of Interior, I scarcely gave press interviews about people's cases, because it's not only unethical, it's unfair, and a reputation one destroyed is difficult to retrieve even when you are acquitted. I think that the question you have asked me, I hope the Ghana Journalists Association is taking note. They are a credible professional organization. I'm a lawyer. I'm telling you what we lawyers think about it. I cannot decide for the Association of Journalists. I think that that matter will have to be taken with them, because the integrity of everybody is important. My office, I can assure you, will try to protect the people we are investigating until it is we decide we are going to make a charge and charge the fellow. But you see, we are dealing with law 959. And if you look at it, Parliament decided that the reports should be submitted periodically. When I read it, what is the nature of the report? And when you submit a public report, what happens to the people being investigated? Will it be my office which will be leaking it? Or by complying with law, people who are being investigated are leaked? These are some of the issues we have to think about and see how best we can handle it. But I can assure you that I disagree with people being investigated before they are put to trial, being tried in the press. It is, I believe, unconstitutional.
Mr. Chairman, this is my third question. We have the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. We have the Auditor General and Public Accounts Committee of Parliament. We have the AG itself, the Attorney General, and we have several other laws that seek to fight corruption. In spite of all this, the perception about the average Ghanaian is that we have not succeeded in our fight against corruption. In fact, if there's anything, the view is that corruption is going higher and higher. That's why the President's call to set up a special prosecutor was widely hailed and widely supported. Your nomination was widely supported because the people of Ghana believe, as you rightly stated, that if we were to even cut corruption by half, a lot of the little things that we need to do and we're not getting the resources, we can do them. What are you going to do differently that these bodies have failed and you believe you can succeed?
Well, as I have said, my track record since 1982 is well known that I'm not the one who chooses victims. Anybody who is caught in the net is dealt with. That itself, if I'm approved, serves as a warning to perpetrators of the offense or people who want to perpetrate it, that you better be careful, otherwise you'll be hauled. I have expressed my own doubts whether we will succeed. But I think that if you establish a credible institution with a credible culture, you can reduce corruption significantly. If you establish a credible institution that does not take political instructions in cases, but acts in accordance with the true spirit of the law, the true prosecutorial spirit of dealing with citizens as citizens and only prosecuting them when they have breached the law and it's in the national interest to do so, then many people will stop or reduce their ability to be corrupt. In fact, I had said that I had quoted Linda Ofodikwafu, who even said that if the president failed in dealing away with corruption, Ghana will die. And I said that I don't think Ghana will die as such, but that the revolution of the fight against corruption may have to await another revolution. Because if we don't stop this canker and we think we can go away with it, people have used it as a ground to destabilize this country in the past. I'm saying that let's stop it before any opportunist would use it.
I think Honorable Helu has asked this question, but for record's sake, I will ask you a similar one. Before your name was brought to the people of Ghana and made public, there were those who had every belief that the president was going to nominate a party loyalist to occupy the position you are occupying now. And in fact, as far as they were concerned, that person was never going to be able to perform effectively and efficiently. Of course, you were a party person, and not just a party person, you were once a vice presidential candidate for a political party. There are people both in the NDC and the MPP who believe that they are not comfortable with you. I want you to look in their face and assure such people that you will do your work with a fear or favor,
malice or ill will,
with a malice or ill will, with a party consideration, and that the trust that the president and the people of Ghana have in you, when you finish your work, we will all be proud of what you have done. Because, like I said before, possibly if the president had nominated somebody else who even had remote links, maybe with the MPP, things may have been different. Today, you don't just have remote links, you are deep rooted in the political party, the NDC party. So how are you going to assure those who were saying that don't appoint a party loyalist, don't appoint somebody who is a top politician in a political party?
It's not.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me make this prologue. Invited to meet the president. I did not know what we were going to discuss. And if anybody had told me that I was going to a meeting in which I would end up accepting to be a special prosecutor, I would have sworn that it's not possible. And when I was writing all these things, I did not consider myself as doing it. And as I said, in 1999, I was nominated to the Supreme Court. I declined it. But you see, when we spoke as honorable men, realizing his commitment, I thought that if we fought corruption all this time, to refuse it, if Ghanaians heard it, will think that then why have you been doing all these things all these years? Right. And I'm saying that any prosecutor who chooses victims because he doesn't like them is not a prosecutor. A prosecutor who lives by the taught tradition of the law will prosecute only serious criminals. And he will do so with a reference to political correlation. And indeed, a prosecutor is not allowed to allow himself to be played politics with. Indeed, Reed Jackson, Robert Jackson, former Attorney General of the United States and later on Supreme Court Justice, he was one of the prosecutors at the Nuremberg Tribunal. He's written fantastically about prosecutors. The duty of the prosecutors is to do service to the community by making sure crime is reduced. And what I am going to do is to make sure that if the docket, and I'm not going to even do the investigation, I may not even do the prosecution, independent people qualified will bring the docket, or they may not even bring it to me if I've delegated the function. But if the docket comes and is waiting for prosecution, it doesn't matter where you come from, you'll be prosecuted. And I'm saying that politics will not come into it. That I can assure anybody. But you see, what I would advise is that the radio, the internet, many people make confessions on them without knowing. They think they're exercising freedom of speech. But you see, you confess, and then you get into the Nyaba situation. And when you do that, you don't blame the public prosecutor. Nyaba was a boy who went to Accra Academy. His father kept money under his bed because he couldn't send it to a bank. The boy had his birthday. He went and picked one envelope and sent his friends to a restaurant and they ate. When the father came, money was missing. Instead of him to keep quiet, he went to the police station and reported the boy. Right? Then the boy wrote, yes, my father had a slash of money under his bed. I saw it and took it.
That is the Inyaba situation. You know, so if you don't go to the police won't pursue you. If you don't talk on the air and said, I did this and this man is not rewarding me even though I funded him, under section 129, to fund the potential presidential candidate in anticipation that he will give you job is corruption. Read the law. But see, you say it on radio, confess your sins. And then when the special prosecutor says, come in, yes. So I'm saying that let's be careful what we say in radio. You see? Let's be careful.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate the nominee for his spirited public service, which he started at a young age of 31. I'm sure it will be an inspiration to many young people. If at 31 he caught the eye of the leader of the nation to appoint him, I'm sure it will be an inspiration. Congratulations for keeping that service to this country at the young age of 31 till today. Congratulations. Now, Mr. Chairman, because of the restrictions we have to work under, I have a number of questions. But before I ask the question, I wish to present to the nominee some few documents, and then I'll ask a question of him to speak to those documents. And with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll want to give you copies of the documents.
What is it?
Yes, the first
if you're going to quote from it, unless it is challenged, you can quote from it.
No, I just want him to have it, you know, so that
I have to see it, okay. And then you can go straight and ask the questions.
So the first one is a letter dated 18th January 2012 and signed Martin A.B.K. Amidu, entitled Letter of Apology. And this was to His Excellency Professor Evans Atta-Mills, President of the Republic of Ghana, Office of the President. I want the nominee to confirm, to look at it, and I'll ask the questions later so that he can speak to these documents. The second one is entitled Government Covert Agent. Anas lies gargantuanly to the whole world again, by Martin A.B.K. Amidu. And it's another document I will want him to speak to when I ask my question. And then the other one is Okujetwa Ablakwa is uncouth and uncultured in insulting elders by Martin A.B.K. Amidu. Now it's important, before the question, Mr. Chairman.
Member, proceed. Your question has been asked from these documents already, so they are not new. So please proceed with your question. Right. The commentary before, cut them and go straight to whichever question you want to ask from the document, please.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, the directive principles of state policy under 41, Article 41 of the Constitution says that the exercise and enjoyment of rights and freedoms is inseparable from the performance of duties and obligations, and accordingly, it shall be the duty of every citizen. And my emphasis is on C, so I'll quote C, 41C, to foster national unity and live in harmony with others. Mr. Chairman, also, if you look at section 13(1)(b) of the Office of Special Prosecutor, it talks about similar expectations of the person, you know, to occupy this office. Now, in view of the requirements of the Constitution contained in Article 41C, I wish the nominee to examine the documents that I have referred to and comment honestly on the circumstances in a way to demonstrate that he has a capacity to meet this requirement of living in harmony with others.
Mr. Chairman, I will talk about this letter of apology. This letter of apology, if we had time, I would have produced documents to show how it was procured. This letter of apology was procured from me by the late Kofi Awono, an elder, a former chairman of Council of State. So you will see that at the end of it, I state, and I did that carefully, as it is customary, I have solicited the chairman of the Council of State and Captain Kojo Chikata, retired, as elders, to be kind enough to reiterate my apology to you on my behalf. They asked me to write this letter, and I have said it. Captain Chikata is alive, right? And when Alhaji Mama Idrisu called me and said they wanted this letter, I told him they could sack me. But when the two of them asked me to write this letter, the first letter didn't have Captain Chikata's name. My secretary, Perpetual Achana, who is still working, sent it to Kofi Awono's office. Then he added the Chikata, and when he brought it, the girl typed it and added it there. It was procured by the chairman of the Council of State, who said he was meeting the president that day, and that he and Captain were going to present it to him, and that they had had certain discussions. At the back of my mind, I knew that they were just looking for evidence of an apology and then to do what they wanted to. But my custom respects age. I've worked with these people since 82, right? So I gave them the letter. How come that a confidential letter delivered by the chairman of the Council of State to the president is now making the rounds? But I have already replied to this letter and stated what I'm telling you here today, that it was procured by me by two elders who convinced me that this was not a matter. Just give us the letter and we'll send it. So I wrote it. In any case, for me, I don't see anything wrong when a young person has had a misunderstanding with an elder, somebody who has been his friend for over 35 years, right? And who invites him, come and help me. And there's a breakdown of trust. Just one day, 13th, Mr. Bibaku Mensah said Bibaku Mensah is excellent, he's alive. Until the 13th, the president and myself had never had a problem. So if we had a problem, he's older than me. In Northern custom, no young man is right. If I'm telling lies, tell me. Even when you are right, you meet elders, you apologize. When you go out, then they tell them you were wrong. We just had to let him apologize. That is what this letter means. You are not now, you know that.
So, Chairman, does he accept responsibility for the letter and apology to which his signature is appended?
I am saying that I wrote it on, I accept it under the conditions I wrote it, and Captain Chikata is alive. If I'm lying, yeah. So the Captain Chikata is alive. He wouldn't deny it. As for the other articles I had written,
Honorable, the main question he asked you was, looking at Article 41 and the requirement, it says that, are you able to say categorically that you can live with other people in harmony?
I have lived with decent people in harmony for 66 years. I cannot live in harmony with criminals. That I won't lie. I won't lie. But decent, respectable people who will not ask you to do this and then stab you in the back, those are traitors. I can't live with them. But decent people, I will live with them. Criminals, I can't.
The Speaker, you know, they were, sorry.
Chairman, no, just before he finishes, the Honorable Martin Amidu have held high office in Ghana of Attorney General. There is a letter of apology to which we have his signature as the responsible person. Now, reference to Captain Chikata, he's not before this committee. Reference to Honorable Kofi Awuno of blessed memory is not a reference we can go to. Is he responsible to this letter and its content?
Mr. Chairman, that I wrote it under their persuasion. It's my signature. It's there. It's mine. But the circumstances under which they procured it is reprehensible.
Chairman, I'm raising this because as special prosecutor, we don't want to hear tomorrow that a certain letter signed by him as special prosecutor is procured somewhere. That's the reason. So I want to establish it. So please.
Mr. Chairman, I've said that this is my signature. And I've explained that nothing in this world can be taken out of context. And I've said that this is my signature. And I'm saying that the circumstances under which it was procured, it's not a circumstance in which I would ordinarily have written it. That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm allowed a follow-up because of just a quick one.
Please go on with your questions.
All right. Just, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I presented 3 documents, and I don't think the answer is enough for the other 2, because he said also in answer that he cannot live in harmony with people.
Remember, you have asked one question, which he has answered. He's not done on
3 documents to speak to the 3.
Please.
Thank you.
He doesn't have to speak to documents. You may quote from them. You may ask questions relating to them. He chose to refer apology. Then your first question was whether he can live with harmony, reference the Constitution. Proceed with other questions. If you want to speak to any document, please do.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I thank you and I take your guidance. Thank you very much. I will proceed, but if you would permit me to just make an observation, then I'll proceed with the next question. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, please.
Please, observations are not permissible.
Okay.
Please ask a question.
So, are you, honorable nominee, suggesting to this committee then that the late Professor Mills, Anas Amiriao Anas, and Honorable Samuel Kujeto Ablakwa, per the articles I have shown you, were criminals, and that is why you haven't, or you were not in harmony with them, as evidence in these documents? Thank you.
I have never made any such suggestion. Nowhere.
All right, I will move on to Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. Chapter 24 of the 1992 Constitution still deals with Code of Conduct for Public Officers. Now, Mr. Speaker, I refer precisely to Article 284, which reads, "A public officer shall not put himself in a position where his personal interest conflicts or is likely to conflict with the performance of the functions of his office." Unquote. Quote and unquote. Also, Mr. Chairman, the independence and impartiality of the office the nominee seeks for approval for is implicit in Clause 72A of the OSP Act 959, when in part it states that a member of the board shall not engage in conduct or an activity that may undermine the integrity, independence, and impartiality of the office. Mr. Chairman, answering questions here, the nominee has also talked about how he is expected to be impartial. Now, I make reference to an article the nominee wrote recently. It is entitled President John Mahama's Last Midnight Appointments, Contracts and Recruitments, and dated 21st December 2016. Now, I'll just quote portions and put my question. The Luther John Mahama government promised a smooth transition as though he had an option in the matter. The spin is in the blood of the Luther government, which loots and spins the plundering of the public purse for likes of Wyoming, Waterville, and others, and inflates contract prices to the detriment of the public purse. One would have thought that the massive defeat of the Luther government, never witnessed in the annals of Ghanaian history, will make it circumspect. And the last quotation, and in fact, if you read through this article, every reference to the NDC government at the time is qualified with Luther government. Ghana is worth dying for, and so fellow citizens, speak up and defend your 7th December votes by not allowing this Luther government to deliberately make it impossible. Mr. Chairman, the question is, by this posture, that is demonstrable partiality, will the nominee consider himself an impartial candidate for this office, and will you not be compromising the independence and impartiality required of the holder of this office?
Chairman, at the time the nominee wrote that article, the nominee was a constitutional defense activist, and he wrote that article pursuant to Article 3, which even enjoins that if any action or activity may even lead to the abrogation or suspension of the Constitution, you are at liberty to even use arms and force to stop it. Right? So that's the context in which that letter must be looked at. And nobody can be accused when he is exercising his right as a citizen to defend the Constitution of partiality. I was defending the Constitution. I had to do it as robustly as I could. As special prosecutor, I have to exercise neutrality, and that's what I'm going to do. You know, we have politicians who have gone to the highest bench. They haven't exhibited politics in that bench. General secretaries of parties are now sitting there. They haven't exhibited any partiality. So why will I, a constitutional activist, defending the Constitution pursuant to Article 3, go and be biased when there's no crime? I mean, the whole world will see, lawyers will see that I am being biased. The law is not something you can take for a ride. It's a community where defense counsel, other lawyers reading it, will know that you are not acting well. And that is why even at the last bar conference, the Bar Association offered me the chance to be a guest speaker. Unfortunately, I was going to London. The community of Bar Association will never invite you as a guest speaker if you are a person who wantonly shows partiality as a lawyer. But as a constitutional defense advocate, I will have to be partial because I have to stop what I think is against the Constitution. And those are why the words are very strong. You see, and that's why I said Ghanaians should defend, because the Constitution says as citizens we should defend. So I was asking Ghanaians to exercise a constitutional right. You can't accuse me for undertaking my rights under the Constitution unless you want to suppress my own political activity as prohibited by Article 3(2).
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well taken. Now let's look at some legal rulings from our courts. And because you have been an active player in that field, I will seek your intelligent assessment of two situations. You challenged the decision of the state to pay judgment debt to Mr. Alfred Agbesiwoyomi because, in your view, the agreements under which the judgment debts were paid were unconstitutional for lack of ratification or approval by Parliament, therefore unenforceable. Now, why do you think in a similar case involving the Gitmo 2, the court directed the government to either return the two suspects or take the agreement to Parliament for ratification, when the latter was not an option in the Wyoming case you took to court?
Let me be honest with you. The Wyoming case, I did the case and saw how the order of the court for refund was being hedged around all the time. So I can speak about that. Let's get him to. I have not even seen the judgment. Is it reported? Is it reported? I don't know. But I haven't seen it. And I will not comment on something I have not seen. You know.
Honorable Barbara, I see.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Mr. Martin Amidu. I am impressed looking at your background, from a very humble background, and I believe that young people are looking up to you, that irrespective of your background, the school that you attend, you can make it in life. So congratulations. Mr. Amidu, Mr. Chairman, can you share in all honesty the circumstances of you being asked to step aside as Attorney General by the then President, Professor John Evans Atta Mills, as some quarters are asserting that the ground for your dismissal is insubordination? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I can assure you that I was not dismissed for insubordination. Indeed, there is a consent judgment filed in the High Court which shows that the termination of my appointment was wrongful and the government was ordered to pay me 1 month. I agreed to it. I didn't want to pull this thing. So when they suggested 1 year's salary, I said, okay, it's all right. It's not the money I'm needing, it's the principle. So the whole idea about me being sacked and all that, there is a court judgment. And indeed, the government before it's left was pulling its legs from paying my benefits. And the present government, if they paid at the last end, before they even paid some of it, my interests are still piling. My official card since 2012, the court ordered it. It's still hanging there. But I'm following it. So anybody who gives the impression that I was dismissed for insubordination should go to the court and read the judgment and the terms of settlement. And there's a new Attorney General who should be able to make that available. So don't let us. And you see, let me say one thing. Professor Mills was a very close friend. And I was a very close confidant and advisor. And I'm saying that His Excellency said, Biba Kumensa, his secretary, and Colonel Lawson will tell you that there is no week he doesn't send for me specifically until the 13th, whom I don't know who asked him to call me and my brother's wife and put those questions to me. That's when I thought there was breach of trust. So I told him, I won't serve you again. I said it, that there's a breach of trust. You asked me to come as a friend. If you don't trust me again, I won't serve you again. And then the issue went on. Go and come at 3 o'clock. I said, I will send my resignation letter the moment I get to my office. His Excellency said, Biba Mensa speaks in Hausa. I'm your senior brother. Come back. So I come back. Captain Chikata comes, takes me into a room. How can we seniors be here? And you are leaving us and going. Go and collect the money. So I go to court on the 16th. That's how come this letter eventually came. And then on the 19th, they announced that they had terminated my appointment. Then somebody goes to say I was terminated for misconduct. So I went to court. That's the situation. Biba is alive. He was ambassador to the Vatican, right? He was there. Martin Mills was there. Betty Moldy Drusu was there. I was there. And Betty Mold's husband and myself continue talking. I have the emails here. Don't let us go there.
Thank you.
And
Don't go there again.
That is why I wrote a tribute when Prof died. It pained me he died. And now I will tell those of you who are doubting that Prof and me were very close. Even after the event, Prof told people what he thought about being pressured to let me go.
Barbara, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Now the story is out. There was pressure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. On the 4th day of December 2017, you wrote and posted on the internet an article. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. On the 4th of December 2017, you wrote and posted on the internet an article entitled Wayomi's Suspected Crimes and All the Missing Link. I hope you remember. It's a Martin Amidu. What is the missing link in what you call the Wayomi's crimes? And what do you intend doing about it when Parliament approves your nomination? Thank you very much.
Indeed, that article, my comrade Kokubaku, we've been comrades since the revolutionary times. Even though he fell out with the revolution, I was still close to him. Kwesi Pratt and all those people. He raised the issue of the missing link, right? And then I wrote my article to support the missing link. Because as Attorney General, I had said that Wayome cannot be prosecuted alone, and that all his accomplices must be prosecuted. Indeed, when we met in my office on the 13th of January, the attorneys who are listening, unfortunately Gertrude Akins, the DPP, is dead, but the other lawyers, and then Gezi and Co., who are listening, in the conference room, they all agreed that part of the fault is from this house. Right? So we said that.
Nominate this house as in Parliament or
No, the Attorney General's Department.
Very well.
So if we are going to prosecute, we should prosecute everybody involved and not Wayome alone. That was one of the reasons, why the Hundrums hounded me, so that they would not be prosecuted. So Wayome alone was prosecuted. And if you remember, in the judgment, the judge said that Wayome could not be prosecuted alone, and that those who acted with him were not brought. So Ajet Nasam, who was proved to be a corrupt judge later, acquitted Wayome. If I had prosecuted that case together with the accomplices, the result would be different. And my perception is that the prosecution was bungled to get that guy out. I mean, I was acting as Attorney General, and the facts are there, the files are there. I wasn't making it up myself. The lawyers are still in the Attorney General's department.
Yes,
so if I come into office and somebody comes to make a complaint and can substantiate it, that there was a residual offense, it is not me who is going to investigate it. It's not me who is going to prosecute it. If there is a strong case, why not? There's no statute of limitation to crime.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Amidu, I know you are very passionate fighting corruption. But do you think that as a country we'll be able to fight or eradicate corruption completely or from the system?
No, Madam. Mr. Chairman, corruption, President Kufuor told all of us that it started from Adam. It's even in the US, in Britain, in all those advanced countries, there's petty corruption, but the level and magnitude is the biggest problem. You see, during the PNDC, all of us were afraid, because if you were a PNDC secretary and you were caught, you were for the gallows. So it didn't happen. You remember the first parliament, we bought them second-hand cars, and they accepted it. But you see, the situation has to be dealt with. It has to be dealt with. And that is why I'm saying the president, realizing that if he doesn't deal with it now, we will have a bigger problem, decided that, well, Martin, come and help do it. And I'm saying I'll do it fairly and impartially.
Honorable nominee, my attention has been drawn to some unparliamentary language, hoodlums.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Barbara, you're done now.
Last one.
Well, I usually allow follow-ups.
Follow-up.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Amidu, I know the President is very confident. His Excellency Nana Adjudant Akufo-Addo is very confident that you'll be able to deliver. I want to know from you what legacy you'd want to leave and you would be remembered for. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, let me be very humble to tell you that I accepted the nomination to try. I didn't accept the nomination on the grounds that I will succeed. I accepted to try. And that's what I'm going to do. Because I'm just one person. My deputy's integrity and honesty will be important. The integrity and honesty of my staff will be important. They are going to be adults I didn't give birth to. They would have had several socializations I didn't take part to, as Honorable Minority Leader, as a sociologist knows. But I'm going to try to work with them, and because of my example leadership, hoping that they will all let us work as a team in the honest spirit of achieving something. I think that...
Chairman, I've heard the nominee acknowledge that he'll be working through a board. I've heard your deputy, your staff. What about your board?
The board that will be matters of policy, but they will not decide for us our investigations and prosecutions. That will be to interfere into my independence.
What about the Attorney General?
The Attorney General will be prosecuting under her authority. That doesn't mean that she would instruct us who to prosecute and who not to prosecute.
Chairman, I'm compelled, just Barbara, before you are done, I'm compelled to go to Act 959. And for the nominees, if you follow through the law, functions of the board is not limited to policy. It's in addition, and I'm reading C, D, E, and F. Even though F supports your position, policy matter. Advise the special prosecutor on the recruitment and selection of the secretary and other staff. Develop and monitor implementation of a code of conduct for staff of the office. And facilitate cooperation between the office and relevant national investigative bodies such as IOCO and SHIRAI. So beyond policy, what role will be your board? I note with satisfaction that you say you are just one strong individual, but you need the support of your board to succeed. And Chairman, once I have this floor, let me render...
No, it's not for you.
No. Just one issue. When I raise the issue of the Bulsa Way, a certain impression has been created publicly. I use it advisedly as a cultural joke, which is the case, to inspire humor into the debate, which I shared politely even with the chairman before I came on. Any person feeling offended, I regret it and I retract. I thank you. But it was used strictly in the cultural sense of a joke, of the joking relationship established within Northern Ghana and Northern culture. But to my question, your board.
Mr. Chairman, I will say that the relationship, the bull says, I will leave it, but I have a different view, as I've said already, But my board, as I said, all those recruitment issues and all that, if you look at policy generally, it all comes under it. And definitely we will interview staff and all that. But the law also says that in the day-to-day performance of the functions of the special prosecutor, he will not be under the direction or control of any person. But you also look at the way you form the board, and you will see that there is a little bit of a problem there. But I think that we can still work it out. When the whole board is composed, I think we'll be able to find a working way, because this law must work. Doesn't matter what the problems are. We are human beings. It's important to fight corruption. We will not be looking at what lapses in the law there are. I am prepared to work with the board to make sure that the institution is set up. But I'm not going to allow the board to usurp my investigatory and prosecutorial functions which have been given to me. As the article I sent out shows, I sent out on the net shows, even in the United States, the Attorney General doesn't instruct the special prosecutor. Mueller is there. But you realize that when the Attorney General tries to interfere, the nation rises up. And I'm expecting Ghanaians who are supporting this appointment to behave like the Americans are behaving. So to be our backbone when politicians want to interfere with our independence. So that's the situation. So I don't see any conflict between the board and my office. You know, I think that it is doable, it is workable, and we will go on well.
Chairman, before the Honorable Okujeto, the nominee have just stated a very important historical fact of America and Mueller. Mueller is contemporary. That's 21st century, 2016 and 17. But if Ghana was to learn, I appreciate the point you are making, that we need to learn from best practice. If you go back to Watergate scandal in 1978, between President Richard Nixon, when Nixon appointed Cox, Nixon appointed Richardson Attorney General, then subsequently Cox as Special Prosecutor. You don't think that Ghana may have to go through some experience just like the Americans did in the 70s before the improved special counsel that they have today?
Mr. Chairman, I think that we learn as a nation, we learn from other nations' experiences. As you said, Richardson was Attorney General. He appointed Cox as Special Prosecutor. In his parliamentary approval like mine, he promised Parliament that he will not fire Cox. Then Nixon directs him to fire him, so he resigns. Nixon directs his deputy to fire him, so he resigns. It was only Brock who agreed to fire Cox. And when he did that, the whole Congress was up in arms. The whole nation was up in arms. That is what brought the Ethics in Governance Act 1974 and made it impossible for the special prosecutor to be dismissed. So that lesson is there for us to learn. And I'm hoping that with an eminent constitutional lawyer as president, I mean, I should think that he should know that already. And maybe that's why he decided that I should come and do it, so that I can maybe take the bullet but say it won't be done. I don't know.
Chairman, to the nominee, President, eminent constitutional lawyer, Special Prosecutor, eminent constitutional lawyer, what is wrong with the board, as you suggested? The board, you said in your reaction, you gave us an indication. This Parliament, our committee makes recommendations. When you looked at the composition of the board, you went close to saying that, look at the board, we'll work with it. Is there something wrong that you want Parliament to take note of and to look at?
No. What I'm saying is that we will work with the board. I don't think it will be fair for me. When I meet the board the first time, I'll tell them what I think our problem is. And then we can collectively take it. I won't sit here and be talking about any lacuna in the law when they are absent. So if you bear with me, when I have met them and we have resolved the lacuna and we are moving, I will tell the public how we have managed it. But to do it here will be a little bit jumping the boat.
Very well. Did you finish asking your question? Okay. Honorable... No, you are done. Sorry, it's the turn of the minority.
I'm most grateful, Mr. Chairman. The Honorable Martin Amidu did say earlier, when you were asked about the assignment you were given to investigate the then Social Security Bank Limited, July 1988 to September 1988. For our records, did I hear you say that you were the only person of integrity found at the time to do the work?
I didn't say that. I said I was in the Volta region. And the chairman of the PNDC was looking for the hard-nosed man. He normally, because I see things others don't see, because of my capabilities in investigation. You get what I mean? And all those who know me, whether police, commissioner, CID, DPP, who have worked with me, know that I have a knack which is God-gifted. So he was looking for the hard-nosed man, and that was me. So he gave me that additional responsibility instead of appointing somebody from Accra. At that time, my friend there was in Revenue Commission, what you call CVC, you know. So I came and did the job, and I did it with a fear of favor. I'm not saying that I was the only honest person in the regime. Otherwise, we wouldn't have traveled that long from 82 and safely, what do you call it, bagged the ship on 7th January 1993. We couldn't have done that. One man, the chairman himself had more integrity than me. That's why he was able to control the ship of state to a successful landing.
Thank you very much. I want us to come to Section 2 of the Act, the Office of the Special Prosecutor Act 2017, Act 959. There has been a lot of focus on investigation and prosecution, but there is a very important function assigned by Parliament under the object of the office. If you look at 2C, it says, take steps to prevent corruption. Because I believe that we should be interested in improving systems, making it difficult and impossible as much as possible for people to engage in corruption. We should not be scrambling around when the horses have bolted and then we are trying to prosecute people and retrieve stolen and stashed away resources. Can you share with this committee your vision, your ideas for preventing corruption as Section 2C of the Act stipulates?
I mean, I've already said that one of our duties will be preventative, you know, and good investigation, good prosecution for once. Education also acts as a preventative function. Within security and intelligence, there are certain methods you have to put in place to curb the loopholes. I cannot discuss them until I'm approved and appointed, and that one will maybe not be known to the public, because if it's known to the public, then there will be no need putting them in place. But we will put in place mechanisms that will make the offenses we are talking about unattractive to anybody who wants to commit them. So I can assure you that indeed the preventive measure is one of the most important measures the law has given. If you can prevent it, you save the whole nation. And the nation will have to be sensitized. When we begin educating the public on what corruption is, we will see that the assumptions, the things we take for granted, are things which really are prohibited by law. And we hope that can be a beginning. And we can do something using methods which other countries have used, but which cannot be disclosed publicly.
Mr. Chairman, can we come to your critique of the Office of the Special Prosecutor Bill 2017 by Martin A.B.K. Amidu, signed on the 6th of September 2017. You have stated here, time without number, that you are a man of principle. When you are being asked to bend your principles, you will better walk away. You will not allow your principles to be compromised. I have carefully read the rather erudite critique that this 25-pager offers. And I come across four major concerns you raise that you expected that the final output, the final Office of the Special Prosecutor Act 2017 will have addressed. First, you made a point that fundamentally you do not think that this office is even needed in the first place, and that Article 88 is adequate, that we need an Attorney General of integrity. That has not happened. Secondly, you make the point that the Special Prosecutor should not be accountable to a board. But if you read Section 14.1 of the Act, which has been assented to by the President, it says the Special Prosecutor is accountable to the board in the performance of the functions under this Act. You have said that that is a bureaucratic interference with your work and your independence. You also complain about the 15 years. Yes, I want.
He will ask a question after he has recounted this. I'll allow him one question. Now, this is just his prelim. I mean, on this one.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that there are four major issues you raise in your critique. That the Office of the Special Prosecutor is not necessary.
So you may now ask
that the board is not necessary. You talked about the 15 years, the qualification of the Special Prosecutor being a disincentive. You thought that it was too low. But even in the Act, what has been finally approved is 12 years. Then finally, you said you are opposed to the President appointing the staff at the Office of Special Prosecutor, that the Special Prosecutor should be allowed to appoint people that he can work with. But in this Act, Section 21 of this Act, it is the President that's going to appoint this Act. And in your own words, quote, you said, this undermines the Special Prosecutor with politically minded persons, unquote. All of these are in this Act. You have been saying you are a man of principle. Why are you here? Why are you accepting this appointment with all these impediments you have complained about?
Mr. Chairman, it is not true to say that I said that without the Attorney General being allowed to prosecute the crimes, as an Office of Special Prosecutor is not necessary. I have quoted previously, if the Honorable Questioner was listening, that the moral compass and integrity of the President, and that shows that I stated clearly that this is a President who has gone to elections and won on the basis of a promise, and that it is doable. So to quote out of context is a little bit disconcerting for me, Mr. Chairman, because I have read a number of times that I have said it is doable. And I have said that when the President called me first, he said, Martin, I wish the Attorney Generals could do this, but you know that the public doesn't believe in them. So I promised to do this thing, and we have to do it. Right? I agreed with him. You get what I mean? And therefore, when he said, look at it, the board, I'm telling you that the definition of accountable and interpretation of accountable by law doesn't mean that the board is going to push you around. I've cited two cases in my critique, which if you read, explicates what under authority is. That's why I said it should be under the authority of the Attorney General. From the perspective of my understanding, I said that the board, the Special Prosecutor ought not to be accountable to a board because she's going to work under the authority of the Attorney General. The Attorney General has a legal counsel place, and so to impose another board over the Special Prosecutor, who is just going to do a mere prosecutorial function, will be added bureaucracy. This Parliament has decided that it needs a board, right? I was giving a critique of my opinion. This Parliament has decided it needs a board. It's put the board in a certain way. I have looked at it carefully. I think that it is workable. I have told you that I agree entirely that we must not throw the water away with the the dirty water away with the baby. That's more fundamental to me than anything else. You know, so that is the context in which you are seeing the contradictions. But to me, as long as we can stop the leakages and seepages, which no president has tried to do before, I'll go ahead with him. That is the more fundamental principle, to stop corruption, not to postpone it. And I think that is more supreme. That is why I agreed to do it for him. And as I told you, I didn't think I'll ever accept this job. You see, I'm not bothered about the Court of Appeal judge. I was to go to the Supreme Court, not because of them. I'm doing this job for the love of making sure that people of this country have a better deal and stop the political elite and establishment from siphoning the money of this country abroad. That's why I'm here.
Sammy, yes. Chairman, did I just hear the nominees say no president, no president? Are you suggesting that there's been no attempt or effort by any president to fight corruption in this country?
I don't know the context in which you are quoting me. No president has passed the Special Prosecutors Act. That's what I mean. And if there is one, show me.
Mr. Chairman, I will be moving to my last but one question now. I just thought that the Honorable Martin Amidu will have used his leverage with the President to help us have a more biting and stronger office of the Special Prosecutor Act in line with his own critique. But I will move on. If you can please come with me to Article 296 of the Constitution of Ghana. It reads, where in this Constitution or in any other law discretionary power is vested in any person or authority, A, that discretionary power shall be deemed to imply a duty to be fair and candid. A duty to be fair and candid. Emphasis mine. B, the exercise of the discretionary power shall not be arbitrary, capricious, or biased, either by resentment, prejudice, or personal dislike, and shall be in accordance with due process of law. Unquote. Mr. Chairman, I have a number of articles that the Honorable nominee has authored. I have here the 8 December 2016 congratulatory message to President-elect Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. In the second paragraph, you write, quote, changing a government under which the mass of ordinary people were unnecessarily and needlessly burdened over the years under the yoke of massive and pervasive corruption, deliberate oligarchic mismanagement of abundant natural resources, party, political, and ethnic cronyism, and abject ineptitude peacefully through the ballot box is a feat worthy of emulation by other citizens of the West African subcontinent, in particular Africa in general. Then there is this second article dated 1st August 2017 under the caption, Yaw Donkor's whining is karma for abuse of the Constitution as a public officer, by Martin A.B.K. Amidu. If I'll quote your last paragraph, you write, I have no tears for your egg. Stop whining for the respectful treatment from the police when you refuse to grant your fellow citizens similar respect when you had the opportunity to serve our motherland, Ghana. Yaw. But in these cases, we still have judgment here, karma. And I've gone through this 4-page article. You appear to be gloating at the woes of Mr. Yaw Donkor, the former National Security Coordinator. If I'll quote from the last article I have here, just because of time, the 9th January 2017 article under the caption, the 7th Parliament must restore the confidence of citizens in the honor and integrity of the legislature, by Martin A.B.K. Amidu. You wrote, and I quote, unlike previous elections in the annals of our history, The pivotal and critical issues were between electing a corrupt, bankrupt, inept, incompetent, abusive, impudent, and looter incumbent government, and electing one of the contesting candidates dedicated to fighting all these unconstitutional, capricious evils and protecting the national purse. The massive trashing of the incumbent looter government of John Dramani Mahama, may God never give Ghana a corrupt and looter president like him again, unquote. These are your words. Article 296 talks about being fair, being candid, not being driven by resentment. I see a lot of resentment in your articles. Can you, in all true conscience, tell the people of this country and this committee that you are not biased, you are not capricious, and you are not out to do a hatchet job for someone, as some sections of the society believe?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I've been called glutton, which normally I would not accept from anybody, but he has a privilege against another citizen, and he chooses to use those epithets on him. That's okay. Let me say that I have no leverage whatsoever over President Akufo-Addo. I never met him since we stopped going to court. I've never met him or spoken to him. The only day I saw him was when he came to swear in the Chief Justice, the new Chief Justice. He was going around greeting lawyers, and he shook my hand. Amidu, how are you? Fine. And he passed. The next time I met him was when he invited me to give me this nomination. I have not seen him since then. I have not spoken to him. So I have no leverage. The impression being created is erroneous, and it ought not to be peddled. You see, there is no evidence to support this statement you've made. I have stated that as a constitutional defense advocate, I fight for the people of Ghana using all the arsenals at my disposal. But you see, the questions you have asked me have failed to tell the other side of the story. The articles I have written against the MPP government and the Speaker, including the Honorable Chairman of the committee, when Honorable Mama Ayara got the problems, the things I wrote about him, which was in favor of the NDC, you've gloated over it. When I asked whether the Speaker was the enforcer of the law, you've gloated over it. You know, I've written things against all the political divides in defense of the Constitution. So if I'm going to be, you are saying that because I've written against the pond, a crocodile from the pond in which I come from, I cannot be impartial. What of those in the pond I don't come from? I am saying that the position of special prosecutor is a prosecutorial position, and I stopped practicing law and was doing constitutional defense. Now I'm going back to the practice of law. I will live by the ethics of the legal profession and the code of conduct of the Constitution. And I know better the discretion of the prosecutor because I've practiced it as Deputy Attorney General for upwards of 12 years. And I was Attorney General for 1 year. Who else in this country will know it better than me? I'm the longest serving Deputy Attorney General. So I know what it means to be impartial. I'm telling you, the fraternity of law is not a sleeping fraternity that's going to close his eyes to Martin Amidu taking victims for his own personal aggrandizement. They are there as watchdogs. And I've lectured on ethics to law students, and I've told them, watch out. Any lawyer who does that is not worth the name. I'm not going to be a special prosecutor who will go into history as being vindictive. I will not.
Sorry, tell me you're done.
No, that's my last question now.
No,
that was the agreement, that this will be my last question. I'm grateful, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my final question comes from the book authored by Dr. Obed Yao Asamoah, and the Honorable nominee just talked about the many years he's been Attorney General. For many years, he was the deputy to the venerable and respected Dr. Obadiah Asamoah. In this widely acclaimed and fascinating book titled The Political History of Ghana, 1950 to 2013, The Experience of a Nonconformist, on page 465, Dr. Yao Obed Asamoah had this to say about you. Page 465. 465. Dr. Obed Asamoah said, quote, "In the end, Professor Mills chose as his running mate, my deputy, at the Ministry of Justice, Martin Amidu, in a surprise and unproductive move," unquote. Surprise and unproductive move. In the next paragraph, he writes, "In my mind, I did not think that Martin Amidu would be beneficial to the ticket," unquote. I'm sure that you are aware of this publication. This was your boss for many years. You've talked about us checking with the people you have worked with to vouch for your credibility and your hard work and impartiality, which I am not saying is in doubt at this point. But how do you respond to your boss passing such a damning verdict on your selection as running mate of then candidate Mills?
Mr. Chairman, in the first place, Dr. Asamoah is not my boss.
Honorable Oni, hold on. If you wish to answer, fine. But I would have...
let me answer him.
Very well.
Dr. Asamoah is not my boss. He did not pay my fees through law school. He was called to the bar. I was called to the bar. He didn't appoint me Deputy Attorney General. I was appointed Deputy Attorney General before he came there. And I served under Akins, Nanatano. Mr. Forson came for 6 months before he was asked to act, right? And we are colleagues, except that he was the Attorney General and I was the deputy. And therefore I knew my place and worked with him. That doesn't make him my boss. You see, so you are reading a self-serving book in which he wanted to be the vice presidential candidate. He was bypassed. The candidate saw in his deputy more competence, right, and excellence than him. Then he writes a book, and he writes this thing, and you are coming to read it to the whole public. I've never read that book. I've heard about it. But you see, you have raised it in public. You see, you are reading a self-serving statement when your own presidential candidate and later president saw me as a more preferred candidate than him. And in any case, the law reports demonstrate that while he was doing that, I was going to court. He didn't train me. So don't, and if you say he's erudic, well, that's your comment. But you see, I regret that you've brought his book and you want to knock my head against his. In his recent interview to MFA Apau, he described me as a person of honesty. You see, but you see, you people, you will collapse your old people by reading these things. Then I'll react this way. Dr. Asamoah calls me. Dr. Asamoah calls me, even when I was Attorney General. And even when he was accused, he called me to find out, Amidu, did it happen? And then I told him it didn't happen. So I'm on good terms with him. So if because of vetting we are doing this, I don't think it's good. You know, I would have let the question pass, but the public will understand it otherwise. Indeed, Professor, he and my senior brother, Elijah Mamedus, were looking for it. And then when Prof gave it to me, I told him, I will not accept a position which my senior brother was looking for unless he gives his blessing. I asked him first, have you told Dr. Asamoah? He said, yes, he's supposed to have been with me here to announce it to you. But he said, I can go ahead. I asked him, did you tell Elijah Mamedus? He said, no. I said, that's my senior brother. I can't take a position he was looking for. So if you want, after he persuaded me, I said, well, then you have to seek Elijah's concurrence. I was driving myself. I drove to Elijah's house, pointed to his house. Prof went and saw him. Asked Elijah, he's alive, he's not dead. Before I accepted the position. So my customary behavior with elders is special. And I wouldn't have liked to talk about Dr. Samoa. You've put temptation in my path. Unfortunately, unlike Justice Philip Acha, I took it. But I'm sorry to make those comments about him.
Chairman, I'm only doing my job. I thank you very much.
Honorable Ogujoto, you're done, please. And I can't say, I mean, I would have wished that we didn't go there, but I think we would. I'll take a touch here, and then we'll break for lunch, because we can continue, but the candidate needs a break to stretch his legs, and so we will take a touch here, and then we'll break for lunch and come back. So please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is the most dangerous man alive. An apt description, or much ado about nothing. But before he can wield the axe, he must square it off with the appointments committee. Will the nomination of this fearless man pull through, or will there be a shocker? Don't lose a minute of this historical face-off. Only time will tell. Tuesday, February 13 on GH1 Television. GH1 News. News you can trust.
As far back as the days of Kwame Nkrumah, he recognized that unless Ghana industrializes, our hopes of creating wealth are limited. I first went to the trade fair when I was in primary school in Ghana.